Yeah, we all are.
But it
For a
is,
second.
I
Yeah.
can, yeah, and I'm just
We
gonna,
live?
like I said, you know.
We've been
not
live?
understood.
Yes, but my question is.
Well,
Whoa, whoa, yeah.
that's just,
That was my question.
Want to take this time to welcome the Board of Directors for our agenda meeting for April 13, 2021. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our formal board meeting that will take place on April the 20th. We have one modification for tonight's agenda. That's item M1, which is a resolution to approve the purchase of furniture for new Little Rock Police Department headquarters. Board members, are there any questions from items 1 through 13? Please utilize the raising hand function. Vice Mayor Hines.
Yes, Mayor, I've got questions on 10, and 11.
All right, Mr. Moore, if you'll handle 11, and then we'll get
I'll handle 10 too.
you handle 10 too. All right.
You have a particular question, Vice Mayor? On
Yeah, so as I recall, I see another LED lighting fixture at a River Market parking deck that they are upgrading lights on that ends up putting us footing the bill. So last time this happened, it was done before we approved it. Has this work been done?
I listen, and so the LRCBV staff put out a bid, and the A&P Commission has approved the bid. And before we did the work, before we authorized work, I brought this. It's our parking deck, so we're responsible for it.
Right. So, and I guess the question is, we're getting a $30,000 grant?
It'll be an incentive, basically. This is $80,000, and they feel like that we'll be able, basically, by the end of the process, it'll be about 50,000, correct?
Okay. So I still question, you know, they trigger this when it goes above 50,000 and why do I understand right, the LRCVB is going to do this with their own labor?
Correct.
So why isn't it maintenance? Do you understand what I'm saying? If they can change them out, why do they have to do it all at once? They could do one level at a time and not trigger the $50,000.
And I said, it's actually with a company called Clear Results. They actually put out a bid for it.
I just question whether or not, do we have this budgeted? I mean,
We do.
and then, can you give me the scope of Peter Damon Group? I know we're partnering with, can you line out which entities we're partnering with? I know the airport, port.
Here, I think Ms. Cox is here. Okay, correct. This is with the Little Rock Port Authority, the airport, Little Rock Wastewater, and Rock Region Metro.
Thank you. Mayor, one other item. I'd like to hold 13 separate.
Mayor.
Director Hines will hold. Do you have a question for 13? Just want to hold it separate?
Hold it separate.
Oh, Director Wright.
Director Wright.
My question is on 11. Can I get a explanation for those services?
Mainly, they're going to be providing us assistance in obtaining federal grants from those 5 different areas.
How much are we paying them?
$24,000.
Why isn't that listed?
Excuse me.
Why isn't that listed?
It is in the resolution, I believe. It's in the resolution.
I left my tablet. I've been on the run all afternoon.
In section 3, is the city of Little Rock will be responsible for paying up to $24,000 over the course of the 1-year contract.
For federal government relations and consulting services.
Right.
That doesn't say to me,
Again, mainly, there are a lot of, I think, federal dollars that the city and these other entities don't know about, don't have access to, and this will allow us the ability, and we've done this in the past, and this will just allow us the ability to be able to access and hopefully be awarded federal grant opportunities.
so our grants department won't be involved with this.
Oh, definitely. This is a company to help us assist accessing those dollars, but our local grant division will still be very active.
Okay, so if I just sent you a grant that was forwarded to me for STEM, would that impact applying for those funds?
Correct. Usually, they're not so much grant writers necessarily. They're there to assist us with obtaining access to the grants.
Director Wright, so essentially, how you deal with our traditional grants team, that will not change. This gives us the opportunity. There are a lot of things that get left on the table that we may not be aware of or have access to, and then sometimes may not be included due to our size or demographic as a city. And many times, if you can access those who are drafting these things, we can get those things kind of included as we move forward. So for instance, there was a lot of advocacy and consulting went on originally with the COVID-19 as other new federal dollars come from a stimulus standpoint, that those dollars go directly to the cities rather than going directly to the states. And so this is those type of things.
Okay, I just want to be sure that I'm clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Because there are other ways to do that. You know, we have a federal delegation that has staff that can provide us with this information as well. So I just wanted to make sure that we were accessing.
This helps to ensure, as you know, our delegation does a phenomenal job, but also this has individuals be focused solely on the city of Little Rock and what we have to get moving forward.
Oh, I don't disagree with it. I just want to make sure I understand it because I know
We're on one accord. Yes, ma'am.
looking for money, it's always a challenge.
And just an example, as I mentioned, we've done this before. We had a partnership, again, with the port and the airport when we engaged James Lee Witt and Rodney Slater, Secretary Rodney Slater's firm. So we've used this format before.
Was I on the board?
You were.
All that, but okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Bruce, can we back up to number 3, land bank transfers? I know that UMS helped support our 12th Street revitalization work by funding some of our consultants. And part of how we sold that to them was to improve the land, the housing stock over there for their current employees. I think Children's Hospital with Scott Gordon, he was there, was on our steering committee. And wait till they finish. We didn't have a school district involved, with the exception of having the superintendent on the school district from the school district at our steering committee. So my question to you will be, who's going to develop this conceptual framework that's going to preempt gentrification in those neighborhoods? Because that's the biggest fear. And you and I are working with Philander Smith, UAMS, and Southern Bancorp for expanding their work south of 630. So now I suspect that a lot of these properties are going to be south of 630. And I think I sent you and Jamie an email today about figuring out a way to re-engage our consultants from our 12th Street work. So who would be responsible for helping develop this conceptual framework that preempts gentrification? I mean, are we going to be partnering with Habitat for Humanity again and BCD and university district partnerships. How are we gonna implement this? I guess is my question. That's gonna keep us from having these neighborhoods become gentrificated. That's a big fear of a lot of those folks over there.
Sure, and I think that's important, and I think the land bank is sort of going to be helpful in guiding this process. One of the things, as you know, when we first started this, we added city employees and school district employees to help them access these properties, and this just expands the list somewhat to include Arkansas Children's Hospital, but it's a pattern we've used before as far as giving these employees or these employee groups access to the land bank.
Well, that was a selling point that we utilized to get Dr. Butler and UMS involved to help us fund our consultants. But I think Scott Gordon from Children's Hospital, I think he's retired now, and although they didn't give us any funding, he was a part of that work as part of our steering committee. So I don't think we had Children's Hospital included on that list or UMS included on the list, with the exception of us working with them through the 12th Street revitalization. So tell me, how did that come into fruition? So I can be a little bit more clear when questions are directed towards me.
Sure, and I don't know if Kevin or Ms. Dean want to give.
Good afternoon. Director Richardson, for quite some time, UAMS has been working with the land bank to try to create a live local feel in that 12th Street corridor. And with the available lots through the land bank, they came and requested that their employees be able to access the program that we already had in place as far as with the land bank, so that if they found a lot that they like and they qualified, and they'll be able to get that piece of property for the minimum amount to create affordable housing for themselves. And so through a partnership with University District Development Corporation, BCD, and affordable housing, any community housing development organizations, they will be able to go to that nonprofit organization and develop a house for them to live in.
Thank you. So how will we implement that, since in the past we've had NSP 1 and 2 money to do that with those parties you just listed? So are we looking at them to privately invest their funds and make this happen, or are we looking at those partners that you listed that we've had in the past to create new houses in that area south of 630?
Yes, and so UAMS will have other avenues that their employees can access as far as different subsidies that they'll provide to them. They are allowing the actual homeowners that are accessing these dollars that are employees to go to a normal situation with going to a mortgage company and then applying, and then if they qualify based on what they apply for, then they can get these subsidy dollars to access these homes.
So one other question, are we planning on utilizing UV structures to help accomplish this? Because I think we have a disproportionate number of unsafe vacant housing stocks in that area, and I think we don't do anything about it right now. 3 years from now, if I'm up here, it's going to come back to us with demolition. I think we have far too many home demolitions in wards 1 and 2, and far too many unsafe vacant structures in those wards. So are we going to be able to utilize any of those structures as a carrot stick or caveat to bring them to the table to get them involved with that?
Yes, we're currently updating our list as far as the number of UV structures we have throughout the city. And one of the focuses we'll start doing now is with the land bank is trying to access those structures and apply with these homeowners that own these UV structures to try to get them under our belt as far as under the city's ownership, so we can get those properties and then go in and rehab those structures so we don't have so many demolitions as you stated before.
Now that you asked me, that would be my preference, because I think that a lot of those UV structures contribute to some of the social ills that contribute to some of the crime in those parts of our communities. They become trap houses, so to speak. We don't have that same problem with vacant lots. So that would be my preference, not that you asked, that we figure out a way to target some of those UV structures and try to rehab those and bring those up to habitable conditions. I don't know if that's at the top of the list on the land bank's to-do list, but I think we need to seriously consider that, given that those areas where we have that disproportionate number of those structures happen to be coincidentally areas where we have the highest criminal activity So I would hope that we would look at maybe elevating that to the top of the list in terms of how we make this come into fruition.
Yes, sir. At the last land bank meeting, we did discuss updating the redevelopment plan that was set forth in place previously with the land bank. So the land bank is currently working on updating the redevelopment plan, and that should be a part of it too as well.
And thank you, sir. And I think you did mention we are going to keep University District partnership in place, our partnership with them and BCD. And that we're not engaged in Habitat for Humanity anymore, because I know the last property, they didn't finish it. We had to have a partnership between BCD and University District partnership to finish that last NSP2 project we had in that area. So we're not engaged in them anymore.
Currently, we're in talks with the executive director with Habitat for Humanity. They do have a new executive director, new head. So we are in talks with them currently to possibly bring them back on as a CHOTO so they can access these fundings that we have available to us.
Thank you, sir. Keep up the good work.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Director Hendricks, then Director Wright.
I'm concerned about resolution number 2, and I'm asking that this resolution be pulled. It seems that Director Adcock had been really moving and doing a lot of things, and I'm concerned this is the first time I even talked about this subject. But I would appreciate this resolution being pulled. It's a lot I could tell you about this. The person that's doing this has pushed petitions. It has to do with a garden in a residential neighborhood in a Black community. And you know, I'm really stuck on color, okay? You would not put a garden on the corner north of 630 in a residential neighborhood. I think it's offensive, and I hope that I could get with Joan, not that I got to get her approval, but the garden that exists down there on West 33rd is sufficient. It is not in a neighborhood of people, residents. So we need to talk about, I want this pulled, and we will work with Joan and this young lady who is not a resident of the city of Little Rock. And I'm offended about it as a board member. I'm insulted, and you know I could really go off, okay? But I won't do it today. I'm asking that you pull resolution number 2. The resolution number 4, we're talking about creating housing and all this. I like what it sounds like, but I'm hoping that the residents that approve for this project would be racially divided. I come here with all of one race getting these houses. And how far can I go? Wait a second. Can I get to number 11, or am I out of order?
And Director Hendricks, I think you were referring to items 2 and 3, not 4. Is that correct?
2, and I'm talking about 4. Does 4 have to do with, no.
4 is the Guy Springs
3.
reconstruction.
I'm dealing with 3, that where the property.
Yes, ma'am, 3.
Yeah. Okay, 3. We want to make sure that that is racially equal when it comes to getting houses for people. I know how the game goes. I'm older than any of you all. I know the games we play to do the things that we've done down through the years. Can I go to resolution 13? I think I can make that out. You are wanting to let the public know there has been an extension with regard to, am I too far down? Am I okay?
Yes, ma'am. You're correct.
Okay, 900 West 15th Street. Could Mr. Moore explain that for me? That's not too far from where I live.
And before, while Mr. Moore is gonna locate that, Mr.
Okay.
Carpenter, yes, ma'am?
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Carpenter, Director Hendrick has requested to pull item number 2. It's my understanding, what's the next step if she wants to do that?
It's up to the board. She's made the request. The manager prepares a preliminary board. And then at this meeting, the board decides what it wants on its agenda.
So would the board have to vote?
Not officially, because
No,
you're really
no.
not in a meeting for voting.
All right, so we'll now move, Director Hendricks, Director Adcock wanted to make a comment. Director Adcock?
Yes, instead of this becoming a one city director against another city director, I would like for Mr. Howard to come up and talk about the process that this went through.
I
and
don't want
also-
to hear that.
And
I don't wanna
also
hear that.
for Director Antoine Phillips to comment, because they both know what the neighborhood did in regards to this. And I don't want to sit here and argue with Director Hendricks. I would like for both of them to speak on this subject. I am completely in, this I think would be a great addition to this neighborhood. But I
You
would
know,
like
we-
for both of these gentlemen to comment on what the Land Bank Commission went through to get it to this point.
Director Howard.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, Mayor. The applicant, which is the Village Place, made application to the Land Bank to transfer the property located at 3101 South Arch Street. The applicant followed all the steps of the Land Bank's request in the application. She made application, it went before the Land Bank Commission. It was voted on unanimously to move forward and go in front of the board for a vote. She did follow all the rules as far as going to each of the neighborhood associations located within the area on Arch Street. Also, the applicant's location is 2718 South Arch Street.
That's not her residence.
Ms. Woods provided the information. She did get a conditional permit. And she also provided the information that was requested by the commissioners in the Land Bank Commission meeting. So they did vote on it, and it's before you all now to decide on what you all would like to do for it, with it. Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Director Phillips.
And I'll just respond briefly. First, as a kind of big picture matter, I welcome us talking to each other. And I appreciate you recognizing that I was at the meeting at the Land Bank. In the past, I hadn't directed comments directly to a director, but I'm open to us discussing things in that matter. To the point, though, to Director Adcock's point, I was at the meeting, both meetings at the Land Bank. The Land Bank Board was very excited about the project. They asked the applicant to go back and check some things, and Director Harris can kind of already hit on that. She did what was required of the Land Bank, and the Land Bank approved the process. And as a liaison to the board, I was there to provide, whatever support I could. But I think this is a good project, and I supported the Land Bank's vote of it. Obviously, I didn't vote because I'm just a liaison, but I supported it. But to Director Adcock's point, I welcome us talking to one another. So in the future, I may call on each other the way she called on me, just FYI.
That sounds fine. Kevin, is that a LLC or a nonprofit?
It's a nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit. Thank you.
Director Hendricks, I know you were going through some other items. Did you have some additional items?
The young lady that has made, I talked with her and she knows how I feel about it. And I'm speaking for the constituents of Ward 1 that live in that neighborhood. We have a garden on West 33rd. The person that manages that garden has said that this young lady could come, it's vacant lots down there. This is a non-residential area. This young lady does not reside in the city of Little Rock. This was brought to my attention by the residents of the garden that we have on West 33rd. So why would Antoine or whomever want to put a garden on a corner lot in a residential neighborhood? But no, the thing is, do we pull this or do we leave it on? I'm asking on behalf of the constituents that I serve. And again, I'm just offended that Joan had the nerve to do this. I mean, she's had all kinds of conversations with this woman. Don't be afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you.
Director, Mr. Attorney, if you would just, Director Hendricks posed the question. I think that's a question for the city attorney to answer.
I think the thing to do here is if the board thinks it ought to be pulled, they should express that. If they don't, you should move on.
Could you restate that?
I think if the board believes that this matter should be pulled from the agenda, they can express that. It would be informal. It wouldn't be a vote. If they don't, then just move on.
So what I'll do is I will query and we'll make that determination later.
Well, it seems like, Tom, you just said a minute ago.
Director Richardson, hold on.
I'm sorry.
One second, Director Richardson, because
Sure.
Director Wright has her hand up, and then we'll come to you. Keep us in order.
Well, Mayor, as a ward representative, we have to respond to our constituents. And both Director Adcock and Mr. Phillips are at-large people, which I don't have any issue with that. But Director Hendricks has expressed that she's heard from her constituents that to the contrary about this. And I think just give her that respect for being the elected ward representative, pull this off, have a discussion, see if an agreement can be reached, and if so, put it back on.
Director Richardson, am I hearing the same thing from you?
No, what you're hearing from me was your request to Tom. I thought Tom said it didn't require a vote, but now it sounds like Tom is saying we need to poll the board. Did I hear you correctly? Did I hear you a minute ago say?
I don't think I used the word poll. I think what I said is that you could see if there is interest on the part of the board to pull it or to keep it. If there was interest on pulling it, fine. If not, just move on to another item.
So how do we do that without taking the vote? Do we just write secret notes to the mayor and tell him yay or nay?
No, Director Richardson, what generally happens is a good example, just so we understand the order. This agenda item was placed on by staff. So the city manager placed it on the agenda from the staff, being Director Howard, and the Housing Neighborhood Programs. Now, a member of the board is requesting for it to be pulled. We cannot poll the board, but as mayor, as well as the city manager, we can pull certain things off and we can put certain things on. But each member of the board, if they want something on and they forward that particular item, it is automatically on.
Within the proper time frame.
Yes, within the proper time frame.
Okay,
That does not change.
okay, I'm in line with Director Wright. I think if a board member has a request about something that's going to impact their ward, I think we should be respectful of that. I've seen us do that in the past. I don't think we need to be selective when we embrace that or when we reject that. So I'm in line with Director Wright in terms of us supporting Director Hendricks. That's in the ward. It's in close proximity to where she lives, and she has a lot of constituents she has to be responsible for it too. So I'm in line to support what Director Wright just said.
Thank you for making your comment. I see a hand from Vice Mayor Hines.
Yes. You know, here's an interesting deal. We're having a quasi-public discussion on an item that has followed due order through our processes in the city. It's been placed on our agenda in due order. It's perfectly okay for Director Hendricks to request it to be pulled in this format, but the real request should come at our actual meeting. She can request for it to be pulled from the agenda that night. We'll take a vote, have a formal vote on it in public discussion. I think it's unfair to the applicant in this process to be tried in absentia, essentially, and not get a public voice in this matter. I won't be I think if Director Hendricks wants to remove it, she can make that motion next Tuesday night at our meeting in due order.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hines. Director Phillips.
Yeah, I want to chime in for clarity for those watching and in attendance. City Attorney Carpenter, there's a difference between pulling an item and setting it aside, correct? And holding it separate?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain the difference so people know who are watching?
Pulling an item means that it's removed from the agenda. Setting it aside or setting it in a separate discussion means it will not be a grouped item with other items.
In my understanding that Director Hendrick has asked to pull and not hold it separate, correct?
That's what I understood, yes.
And like my fellow directors, I'm supportive of this community garden. But if Director Hendricks has a desire to pull it, whether it's today or next Tuesday, I do respect her right as a board member to pull or hold an item separate. So saying that for your consideration, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Director Wyrick?
My comments are much like Director Phillips. There's been a few times that things have appeared on the agenda for Ward 7, and I've asked for them to be deferred. And it was voted on, and they were deferred or not deferred. So that seems like the appropriate time to do it to me. Is she didn't ask for it to be deferred. She said pulled, which is a different animal to me than deferred to another time. Usually, we want to talk to neighborhoods, get them together, talk to the developer, things like that. So it seems like it would be appropriate to do it at the meeting and ask for deferral to a time certain in the future.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll now, and I'll report back towards the end of this meeting on what decision I will make. We'll continue on.
I think I'm next.
You're next, Director Wright.
I would like a presentation on item 14 and 15. I think those are planning items.
Director Collins? Director Collins? Oh, there you are, Director Collins. See you.
Hardly knowing with that longer hair, man.
I know, yeah, his hair,
Oh, look, who is that?
he has longer hair. It
Looks
continues to grow.
I didn't know who he was. Y'all know who he was?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Did he?
If we could bring up the, for the land use portion of it, I think the map. Mayor, members of the board, Director Wright, both of these applications for these two items from the commission are tied together. If you look at the map, the land use plan right there, that the site is just north of the Crane Ford along that Bowman corridor. And you've seen this before in zoning, rezoning the land over several decades come through there. So for the land use portion of it, what they're looking to do is change, right now, as you see, it's mixed office commercial. And you've seen some of those applications come in, aligned with the land use plan. And they just wanted to change that to commercial, which would align with what they want to do on the next item, which is change the zoning to the commercial zoning and not mixed, office commercial on there.
Do you know what they plan for that site? I believe that's where, wasn't that the site where Baptist had something going in or some kind of school?
Well, the last plan that the board has seen was more of a warehouse style type use development that was in there. So I cannot speak for what you're talking about, but I can research that and get back with you and the board on that if anything else has come for that UMS, what they're looking at. But for what they're looking to do now is they're wanting to go to for the next item, for the zoning aspect of the land use to align to it, they're wanting to go to a C4 open space district to allow for future commercial development of the site, which would also align with what Crane Ford and on down that type of use has been approved in that corridor, on that side of the road.
So this open display would allow for what?
Well, the C4, that it does the open display, so it'll allow for any type of car dealership that goes through there, like the Crane Ford dealership. It would also allow for several other type uses in C4. That is just one of the uses in C4.
But it says district to C4, comma, open display district. What does open display mean?
Well, that C4 is, like I said, it's for your vehicles, for car sales. It could also be for equipment sales. It's meant to be on major arterial roadways, highways, for instance, where people would park vehicles or things they want to sell, motorcycles, rental equipment, just like you would see out on I-30 corridor, where you've got the backhoes and the other dozers and stuff that people see as they drive by the interstate. So as you get to a larger roadway or two roadways and above, a C4 is an appropriate use adjacent to those roadways.
Excuse me, so you don't have any idea of what their plans are?
Right now, no, just request for zoning.
Because right now, there's nothing there. The property is cleared, right?
That's correct. This went through several land alterations throughout the years, just
Yes.
clearing and stuff,
Sure.
just trying to get it prepped for things, because it's high on one side, but low on another, so there has to be fill operations. So they've done that over decades, and regraded it and also reseeded it and replanted what they've done. So there's been several iterations of that through the decades.
But correct me if I'm wrong, there's no access from Colonel Glenn. The access is from Bowman.
The access is from the internal road driveway that goes up by Crane Road, or Crane
So
Ford,
get
and
up there
then
to there.
you have to come back out to the roadway. It would be out to Bowman.
Okay. Well,
And there's been several accesses proposed in developments that they've looked at to that area. And we would look at them individually for the uses they propose and what they're looking to access and improve along that route.
okay. I'd feel more comfortable if I had some kind of idea what their plans were, but I can't believe that they would come in there and put something that's going to be detrimental to what's already there, which are car dealerships.
Well, I can ask the developer, they'll be here Tuesday on some of
Okay.
the intended plans that they're looking to do there
Okay.
within that C4.
Okay. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just kind of cautious. I don't want something to come
Well, like
back.
I said, this corner of that intersection is a good area for
Mhm.
this type of zoning.
I agree. Thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes, item 19 and 20.
If we could bring up the zoning map, please, for item 19. I'll start on the presentation. Director Adcock, what this is this property is located at 5424 West 33rd Street. Currently, the zoning of the property is R3. What they're looking to rezone it from R3 single family district to I2 light industrial. They're looking to place a parking lot on there and use that to serve the existing auto repair business that's on South Polk Street.
Doesn't this face single-family residence?
Well, I wonder if we could zoom in that a little bit. Now, currently, this is a vacant lot that's sitting right there. Let me zoom in a little bit more. And if you're talking just south of it, yes, there's single family to the south of it. I believe there is, it's R4 zone just to the east of it. So that would be a duplex, but there is single families just to the south of it on Polk Street. The future land use plan for the area is proposed to be light industrial. So the request aligns with what the land use plan is calling for.
But lots of those houses has been residential for years and years. What type of fencing are they going to put next to the neighborhood?
Well, the fencing would be the requirements as set by our standards when it goes against any adjacent zoning that is less intense than what that is. So there would be landscape buffers as prescribed by the zoning and also opaque fencing. If it's by the residential. which for us essentially is the wood fencing slats is accommodating of that opaque fencing.
I would like to request that on separate items, please, instead of with the group.
That's item number
19.
19.
Question about item number 16, Mayor, for Director Collins.
But I also had item 20.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Adcock.
Mr.
Greg?
Collins, item 20, please.
Okay, if we could bring up the plan for zoning map for item 20. Item 20 is sitting at, it's 5804 and 5808 Baseline Road. What they're looking to do is applicant proposes rezone the tract of land from R2 single family to C3 general commercial. Right now, there is two one-story structures are located with the south half of the property along Baseline Road. A paved parking area is associated with those buildings, and the rest of it is mostly grass covered. And this one, if you noticed the write-up, we have started notifying all the neighborhood associations of the zoning request throughout the city. So the neighborhoods we have notified, not only within the 200 feet, but all neighborhood associations were notified.
Are those mobile homes to the right of the site?
Yes, it is. On that east side, that's a mobile home development. As you see going north-south, they access Baseline Road. The city's future land use plan designates this property as commercial. So the C3 zoning would not require an amendment to that.
Okay, thank you.
Director Phillips, you have a question for Director Collins?
Yeah, item number 16. Director Collins, if you could give us a little bit, I'm sorry for not speaking into the mic, a little bit of an explanation of how an applicant, I know in this case that this is a split lot development. There's a single family on one part and then a kind of multifamily on the other part. Could you help me understand the process applicant would have to go through to get a split lot development?
Yes, I can. And some of it is based on zoning. If there's no zoning changes or uses and it's still all residential and it's been residential, it all falls back to when they adopted the subdivision codes back in 1978, which made any lot that didn't meet those the subdivision codes prior to that legally non-conforming. And that does comply to a lot of what you see would consider, and you've heard me talk about before with the board, lot and block. It's a block of land. It's roughly 300 by 300, and it could be divided up with 30-foot wide lots or 50-foot wide lots, and typically about 150-foot depth of it. But in the new zoning or new subdivision regulations that went in, a lot of those lots didn't meet side yard setbacks, front yard, or rear yard setbacks. So as long as the use doesn't change from a single family use or what it is zoned for, the process would be if you wanted to do a lot split, if the lot met the setback requirements and there was no variances to be requested for a lot split, the board as well as the planning commission has passed that authority to do a lot split in those conditions to the planning director. So we are able to do a lot split if there are no variances to request in that. So the lot split would not make it non-conforming. Okay, so that is the easiest way to do a lot split.
But if it is non-conforming.
If it's non-conforming and the variances are requested and the uses do not change, so it is still all single family, then it can go to the planning commission for a replat of those lots to be heard. It will have to follow through a preliminary plat process and a final plat process. And then they are allowed to an extent, and I'd have to get more specific of some of the variances that they can go into. They can't waive certain variances, but they can reduce some certain variances on there. And then the last thing is it gives the planning director the ability that, like this one, if you have two different uses, styles of uses, and then there's multiple variances, to kind of combine that platting process we are allowed to present through the planning commission to the board a planned unit development or a planned residential development, depending upon if there's single or multiple uses. And this one, it just so happens that it was office zoned at one time. Through a CUP, it was allowed to have the duplex. And now what they're wanting to revert it back to is a single family portion and a multi-family portion of it. And therefore that duplex and a lot split to occur. So at that time, the process was easier to go through a planned development process for it to be heard without going through a platting and a final plat process. And so that is what before the board today from the planning commission is just the ending of that process.
Okay, so if a applicant and I'm thinking separate from this actual ordinance, but if an applicant had a lot and wanted to split the lot with two single-family units on both sides of the split lot, if it did not need any variances, then the planning department could make that approval. If it did, it has to kind of go through a different process and work its way through the planning commission, then ultimately this board. Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, the variance is appealable to the board, but in the subdivision matters, it stops at the planning commission.
Okay.
So, and the easiest, quickest way is if it's a lot split that does not make it non-conforming or variance is requested from the codes, then, that is a staff level sign off and approval. We can also recombine lots. So if somebody wanted to have, they had 3 lots and there is a reduction in the number of lots, then that reduction can be signed off at staff level. Other than that, it has to go to the planning commission for subdivision of land or a replat of those lots.
Okay. I think that makes sense to me. Thank you, Director Collins.
Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a general question for Director Collins. We've talked about several ordinances here this evening, 14, 15, 16, 19, 20, and going back and looking at the write-ups, it doesn't appear, I could have overlooked it, just glazing at it quickly, but it doesn't appear that we're getting much citizen input on these items. Have we changed our notification to neighborhoods? Are we still doing, if I remember correctly, you told me you were doing notifications on everything to every neighborhood.
Yes.
But are you seeing less of participation from neighborhood associations, or do these happen to be some that are nondescript and not an impact on neighborhoods?
Well, I'll have to go back and look at each of them. There has been items that's come before the planning commission that has received very little or no comments from any neighborhood or any adjacent property owners when it goes through. We do have, and I can provide to the board, any communication. We put it on, our files and share it with the commissioners before it gets voted on. But for the items that you saw, there was not, anybody that I can remember that come to those items that, spoke for. I think a couple of them on this agenda actually was deferred because of they didn't meet their notification requirements, so it was deferred, and then we had to rehear it again. But yes, we are sending all the notifications out for all applications before the planning commission are sent out to all the neighborhood associations throughout the city, whether it's in their neighborhood or not, and then they can comment on them.
Yeah.
They are on the list. We send it out email in a, just a large email so that everybody can get it at one time to the people that are registered for housing and us. We have that master spreadsheet that all neighborhood associations are registered and put on.
And then also, do you notify about the Zoom calls and how to get on the Zoom calls? I think you have a process for that, don't you?
Yes, on our WebEx, what we do is we send out, we put it in the paper, pursuant to state law, and all notifications of public and the description of what the WebEx meeting is all in the paper stuff. It's also in the notifications that is sent out, be it to the 200-foot criteria. It's also in the notifications of the neighborhood associations, and we take all requests to be on that call up to 4 PM the day before, because we have to put all that package together because it's just time to process so that we can get everybody on. And any documentation that they want to present needs to come to us prior to that time frame so we can get ready and put it on.
Okay.
So that is the process that we set forth when we implemented the WebEx for all of our virtual meetings.
Okay. Well, maybe it's a good time that we advertise to the citizens what our process is at the Planning Commission. And maybe these are just issues that everybody's comfortable with and it's not a problem. But it just seemed like we didn't have any participation. So I wanted you to tell us what our plans are. I thought you'd improved in regards to trying to notify neighborhood associations, but just wanted to clarify that.
Yes,
Thank
well,
you.
I hope that we did improve.
Yeah.
We're sending it to all of them now, so we shouldn't miss any. That's on there as long as they're registered with the city and is on that master list, because that's the one we pull from every
Yeah.
time.
Okay, thank you.
Director Hines?
Yes. Read it to separate item.
Any questions for 23 through 29?
25, Mayor,
All right.
since we don't have the actual.
Mr. Attorney?
25, not 26.
Vehicular trespass. Caravanning.
Oh, yes, okay. We have completed a draft of the ordinance and we had sent it out to the prosecutor's office and also the police department to see if there were any comments. There were. We met again last week and again yesterday. I should have a redraft later today or tomorrow, which we're going to again send out. And we basically wanted to make sure that the relevant parties were in agreement before we tried to bring it forward so there would be no enforcement questions.
So this is a placeholder.
At the
Until we get-
moment,
So the ordinance isn't finalized.
one major thing that I mentioned earlier today is that at one point on caravanning, one entity thought, well, it should be 5 cars, one thought it should be 3, one thought it should be something else. And then I just got to remembering all the times that I took Boy Scouts camping. And so I thought, what we really need to do is if it's 2 or more cars and they're doing the types of activities that are dangerous and damaging, then we will call it a caravan. And that way we won't have to worry about the church groups and others that have as many cars as they want, or the Miata clubs, or the motorcycle clubs that are minding their own business and not doing anything wrong.
Thank you.
All right, Director Hendricks, then Director Richardson.
I may be a little redundant, but I had a question to Tom. I'm
Yes, ma'am.
almost determined to look at some of the discs that I have received from the city of where votes were carried, things were removed without all of this, whatever just happened, okay? So that's what I just want. I don't want Tom to explain nothing to me. I just want to let this board know that things have been removed of the 12 years I've been on this board. Okay? So, and this is not for Hendricks. This is for my constituents who are concerned that the land bank has allowed a non-resident of this city to put a garden in a neighborhood residential area. That's all.
Thank you, Director.
I'm finished.
Thank you, Director Hendricks. And I'll make a decision towards the end of this meeting on whether to pull or not. So thank you for that feedback. Director Adcock.
Item number 27.
Well, actually, Director Adcock, Director Richardson, then we'll come to you because as after Director Richardson, it'll be Vice Mayor Hines and then you.
Thank you for that correction, Mayor. I want to follow up on Tom Lance's point about the caravanning. I think you answered part of my extreme comparison to a funeral procession. But one thing I heard you say that dangerous activity, you separated, differentiate that from a motorcycle club. Who makes that decision? Who qualifies what's dangerous?
Well,
And what is that based on? I mean, it's really interesting that we can separate that, differentiate that from other types of gathering that has long, far motorcycle processions.
right. Essentially, the way that the ordinance is structured now, the draft of it is structured now, it lists specific types of offenses, swerving, racing, things of that nature. And that's what we're understanding is the real caravanning problem. I mean, the 4 or 5 cars, 2 cars, really doesn't matter if they're racing down the interstate, speeding and having something with each other, then we've got a problem. If you add a third or a fourth in there, we've got a problem. So we're using basically definitions from state statutes on illegal driving activities and then putting that into the context of our multiple cars engaged in it together.
Well, I think I understand that. And you'll have a draft of that for us Friday, by
I
Friday's pony.
hope sooner than that.
So then that, okay, because I'd like to look at that and see. This is no new phenomenon. A lot of people know this has been happening in certain parts of our community for quite a while. And it wasn't until Bruce, they got out of that box that it became a concern of ours and something that we wanted to bring to the forefront. But this is nothing new. This has been happening on Asher Avenue and Colonel Glenn, Director Wright, for a number of years. And it didn't become an issue until they got out of that box. And now last week I heard, when I came to my senses, I heard that we were talking about the noise ordinance, and Bruce, that noise ordinance was based on loud music, correct? It wasn't based on the sounds of cars. We have noise ordinances in certain parts of our community, and I can understand that because there are certain parts and you hear noise from music that shakes your house, and if you're close enough, it bounces, it shakes your car, and you can hear it in the street. So the noise ordinance didn't have any consideration or involvement centered around the noise of cars, correct?
Yes.
Excuse me, but Tom, I look forward to I'm like Lance, I look forward to seeing that, and I want to be able to make an informed, intelligent decision on it as we move forward with that. I mean, I think it's a lot of gray areas for me, for us to differentiate caravanning from other gatherings of large cars and/or motorcycles, and to me, it could lend itself to being selective and not objective. And I think sometimes when we selectively enforce things, certain people get penalized more than other people.
Right, and we're trying to make sure that it's got an objective standard in it so that it isn't subjectively applied because one group or another group.
Thank you. And Mayor, now that I have the mic, I know Director, I think Vice Mayor Hines is next, and then Director Adcock.
Director Adcock is next. Is it germane to within the realm? Because we do need to respect Director Adcock being next.
No, it's the next one. I think she wanted to ask for 27, but no, it's not Jermaine or Tito or Michael or Randy.
You know those?
Any of the Jacksons. Yeah, I know them all.
I forgot you were in the music business back in the day.
Tell everybody.
New Edition, right? That was the new Jackson 5.
Yeah.
Director Adcock, then we'll come to Director Richardson.
Yes, number 27. What is the purpose of this? Why are we declaring it a youth violence, a crisis in Little Rock?
Mr. Moore?
Now there's a crisis with all people in Little Rock.
As noted, that's sponsored by Director Wright.
Mayor?
Director Wright?
Okay, thank you. Director Adcock, from January 1 until January 8th, I've had 6 murders in Ward 6. One of them a 10-year-old child in a park. The latest statistics I received that we have had 18 murders among our youth. To me, that's an issue. It's more of an issue, or just as much, well, it's more important to me than vehicle caravanning.
I guess, Director Wright, what I'm asking is what good does it do to call it a crisis? What is it, what's going to be the outcome of calling it a crisis?
I think it's a crisis in the African-American community. We have an issue with this gun violence, and we need to, the programs that I have been advised of and informed of by our prevention and intervention funding and Mr. Moore's communications with me, the programs are not working. We need a research-based strategy that we can employ into these areas and hotspots where we're having these shootings. I had one last night. I don't know if it was last night, but I was called by the neighborhood president about the shooting on Ludwig. And with all the, excuse me, the yellow tape and the police cars and things like that. What we are doing, we've been doing since the 90s. This is the 21st century. These youth are not engaging in the program model that we have.
Mr. Moore, we had a youth master plan, I think a year ago or 2 years ago. Does this fall into the youth master plan, or are we not doing what the youth master plan suggested that we do? I agree with Director Wright, something has to be done, but
Mr. Moore, I can respond.
before we say this is a crisis, I want to look at what are we going to do about it? You know, just to say it's a crisis and not put anything behind it, it's just going to be empty words that we say up here.
That's not quite the case. I submitted a ordinance that outlines the development of a youth violence prevention center that would be a part of our youth master plan for prevention and intervention. And it would be under the administration of our community programs department. And it would be established at the Arkansas Baptist College Derek Olivier Research Institute, which was developed in response to the homicide of a student in front of the college. I think it's Dr. Fitzhill set up the institute to research, to compile statistics and conduct research into what is driving this violence. I believe that we need, as a city, to have a center, a youth violence prevention center in cooperation with the entity that's already doing the work and have been doing the work. And this proposal and ordinance calls for the implementation of various strategies that can be employed, and those strategies will be researched and determined whether or not they are effective. If that doesn't work, we try another strategy. If this doesn't work, we try something different. We can't keep doing the same thing we've done since the 1990s and expect to get a different result with 21st century youth. It is not working. And I, for one, am tired of getting text messages with pictures of dead young people. I was with the school board president Friday night, and she tried to show me, she pulled up her phone and said, the picture of the young man that was shot dead, I believe it was at the Bass Pro out there at the outlets. I told her, no, I can't look at that. I can't sleep already. This 10-year-old child's death has been haunting me. I refuse to allow that child's death to be in vain. A 10-year-old in the park, she should not have been caught in a crossfire of 20-something-year-olds bringing guns to a park. So this calls for the implementation of various strategies that involves conflict resolution, that involves counseling, mental health. There's partners that have come to the table. We have a new entity that I'll be going to their ribbon cutting on Monday at 11 o'clock, and it's called the Confess Project, and they deal with mental health in the African-American community. Most people do not want to acknowledge mental health issues, but they are of a concern. And right now, I'm dealing with I don't know about the rest of the city, but I'm dealing with a traumatized community. I'm traumatized myself. I hadn't slept a decent night since all this child died. So people are living with trauma. And if we don't do something different, how are we going to face our constituents? They are paying a tax for prevention and intervention and treatment. And they have been paying this tax since the late 90s, before I was on the board. And all they know is that the city has youth-based programming in at-risk neighborhoods. Well, that's not capturing this demographic. So we need to do more. LRPD is involved, community programs is involved, and the clergy is involved. But we've got to have a focus in on this, and I think it is a crisis.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Moore, what does this do with our community programs? We've got a department that handles all this type of stuff, and I think Director Wright said to turn this over to Arkansas Baptist College. Can we do that with
You
having?
misunderstood me, Director Adcock. I said to establish a youth violence prevention center in conjunction with the Derek Olivier Youth Violence Prevention Research Center. I'm sorry. The administration of it would be with our community programs department. It would be a part of our youth master plan. That's what I said.
Okay, you mentioned Arkansas Baptist, so what?
Apparently you're not listening. I said.
Director Wright.
The
let's
ordinance
make
is
sure-
to us.
Make sure we all maintain right now.
I keep
Sure.
repeating the same thing over and over. Where is the ordinance? Why was that not passed out?
It's online.
Well,
Yeah, the ordinance is.
can you not pull it up?
What?
Can you not pull it up?
Kind of vague.
No, I do not have my iPad.
Okay, well, I don't have mine either.
Would you explain to Director Adcock what the ordinance does? But Director Wright, the ordinance has been shared with every member of the board,
I thought so.
and it's online for member, and we got to make sure
We have not received a hard
Received
copy
a
of it.
members of the board, every member of the board has access to each ordinance. It's put online in a week. I don't think since I've been here, you've received individual ordinances unless a particular person wanted you to see it. Otherwise, it's been online for a whole entire week.
I would like to receive my information on hard copies, please, and not rely on an iPad.
Well, that hasn't been done in several years for you, but we'll make sure that happens. I just want to make sure that that's the first time you made that request.
I want hard copies, please.
Mr. Moore, you'll start beginning giving Director Adcock a hard copy of every ordinance into perpetuity, even though it's online. And board members, seriously, you guys got to start, it's there online for a reason. Director Richardson, then Director Hines.
Yes, man. Let me chime on that real quickly, Bruce. Unlike in the early 90s, John, when I was doing gang intervention prevention work, it's not the young people that are actually doing the violence. It's that category of people fitting that transition to adulthood, that disconnected adult and youth category, 18 to 24, 25, that are committing these acts. Now, unfortunately, young people become victims. There's a crisis to me in 2017. We had a 2-year-old, 3-year-old get married within a month apart. There was a crisis then. I don't know if this raises is level of importance because it happened in the city park or not, but I remember talking about this in November 2017. Now, in the 90s, Director Adcock, Director Wright, the violence centered around the colors red and blue. Today, the color is green. It's money. And as part of that, we need to figure out a way to find and create employment opportunities for those who are unemployed or unemployed, or those who have been disconnected from those positive mainstream institutions, whether it's through our reentry program, whether it's through something we developed with Arkansas Development, the Workforce Center. But the color is not red or blue anymore, guys. It's green. Now, when I was doing gang intervention work, it was red or blue. And it's not, Director Wright, it's not the young people that are doing it. Now, they may become the victims sometimes, but it's this group, this disconnected adult and youth group, that's 18 to 24, 18 to 25.
I agree with you.
That are disconnected and are involved in nothing but negative activities, and unfortunately have not had anybody reach out to them and engage them. Now, we can have a center, we can have a program, but that program doesn't know the community, and that community doesn't know the program, it's going to be symbolic at best and disingenuous at worst. And whether or not the master plan is going to address this, I'm not sure the master plan was designed to go beyond 19 years old.
And that's why I designed it. I wrote it the way I did so that the research that has been captured can be utilized to assist our staff in updating what we have to address the 21st century issues that we are having. They understand this. And also too, the strategies that will be implemented are, have, as I said, conflict resolution, entrepreneurship, job creation. You've got to get to the 2% that are creating this problem. And I think some of the statistics, I don't want to misquote Professor Davis, but of the 40,000 African-American males in the city, only 2% are committing these issues. Well, I think that 2% equates to 750 young people that fall into a certain category that we need to address. What we are currently doing, as Director Richardson has said, is not addressing those youth or young adults. This will allow us, as I said, to implement strategies, but not only implement, to conduct research on effectiveness, and as well as gathering their attention, getting them into conflict resolution, mentoring, entrepreneurship, jobs. And what people need to understand, jobs now are technology-based. They're digital. There's a digital workforce out there that these young people are involved in on their mobile phones with their social media followings, that they could be, that could be channeled into creating their own income without it being something negative with relation to robbing or shooting somebody over what they have. So it's a mindset, it's a culture, and we are fighting with our one hand tied behind our back. We're fighting with 1990s or 20th century program models in a 21st century world.
Well, what we don't have, and I agree, what we don't have, and I think Bruce, actually this a couple of years ago, we don't have an intermediary between us and those programs. Now, intermediary would take the politics out of the funding decision. It would be a group that would provide us demographic information, data to determine where and what kind of program is needed. And conversely, the intermediary will work as training, technical assistance, evaluation, and program development, make sure these programs are actually reaching the intended targets. So there's no intermediary between us and those programs that are providing supportive services. And to expect community programs to do that, they're woefully understaffed to even think about even trying to do that. There's no way they can do that. They don't have enough staff to do that.
Included in this proposal that I submitted to the city manager is a evaluation component that the community programs would, as administrative lead, have oversight of. But I find this rather distressing because I was on the board when you, Director Adcock, saw a problem in the Southwest Little Rock community among our Latino population. And what you did was get with the city manager and whoever else, and you all designed what I think it's a Little Rock ID. Is that what it's called?
There is a Little Rock ID.
Little
yes.
Rock ID, to allow that population to be able to cash checks or get driver, I don't think they had driver's license or something. There was something going on there. But you came up with a plan to address that situation that you saw in Southwest Little Rock. How is this any different? It's different to me because there are people, when that little girl, that 10-year-old died, that was one life lost. The young man that did the shooting, his life essentially over. The young man that was with him is an accessory. That's a life destroyed. I went out and met with the mother, went to the home and met with the mother because I took some donations from the community to her to help her with cost associated with burying this child in any way that she needed it. That family was devastated. So that's a trauma, that's one more traumatized family, in addition to all the other traumatized families. Here is a stack of letters that was sent to me by people who have lost their children to gun violence in this city. And I will have copies of this made for you, just so you see the impact of what I'm talking about. And it's my constituents expect me to do something. They don't want to hear that we don't know what to do, or no, there's no way to reach these young people. We need to partner with entities in the community that are trying to reach them and have had some success in reaching them and have a similar motivation that we have. When that young man was killed, I believe one of these letters is from his mother and father, because he was an out-of-state student that didn't want to go to the military and chose to go to college. And what happens? He's out in front of the school, being a good Samaritan, helping someone change a tire. And no, he was not involved in any type of criminal activity. It was a random shooting that has never been solved. Now, I've got a letter here from Bishop Fred Harris. I've got all kind of letters here from parents that are crying out. And I don't know what to say to these people, other than I'm trying to do something. And I would hope that my colleagues would support this rather than trying to find a reason not to do it. And if these young lives don't mean anything to you, how can somebody caravanning in a car mean more?
Well, ma'am, sorry, you recognized me for another item, and I brought us back to what Doris was talking about.
Here's a letter from Mrs. Alma Oliver.
When you recognized me, Mayor, I wanted to talk about the ordinance that I'm sponsoring.
Yes, Director Richardson.
Um,
And then after Director Richardson, Vice Mayor Hines.
Director Phillips and I are working with Tom to put the final touches on this marijuana ordinance. I would like to pull this for the beginning of May, but in the interim, I would please ask you guys to be honest brokers in your description of this ordinance. Its intent is not to legalize marijuana or decriminalize marijuana. Its intent is not to encourage marijuana smoking. Its intent is to look at how we are enforcing it, how we're addressing the problem of silent marijuana and marijuana usage. There's rated data and research that says that it's the same between blacks and whites, but the enforcement is forced more heavily on the black population, the black community. So it's to address the disparity in how we enforce and penalize. It is not, I repeat, it is not legalized. It's not asking us to legalize it or decriminalize it. It's asking us to look at how we enforce it and how we address it from an enforcement and punishment standpoint. So, Mayor, without further delay, I would like to pull this until the beginning of May. I think Director Phillips and Tom and I will have the final touches, looking at some housing implications as well as some other employment implications based on our current policies and our operating principles. And also, just for the record, to note that our current chief and our previous chief both said they're already doing this. It's already an approach. So if it's an approach already, then I'm not sure I understand why Director Hines and my terminology, I'm flummoxed by why we don't want to codify this, because if it's an approach already, then it can be selectively enforced. So I want it to be something that we can move forward with. So I would like to pull this, Mayor, without any further discussion on it.
Thank you so much. We'll be pulling item number 26, and it will come back before the board in the first agenda meeting in May. Vice Mayor Hines.
Thank you. Going back to Director Wright's ordinance 27, I understand the framework of it. So question for Doris or Bruce is, so is this 700,000, is that a year? It's not lined out in the ordinances?
Well, I attached you to the proposal. It's a 3-year project. And in that.
So that amount divided by
33.
233. And that includes community outreach, includes marketing, promotion of the initiatives and the outreach to the young people, street teams, various strategies, but a lot of this is going to be how do we reach these young people in the social media world that they live in, and also too any type of workshops and that kind of thing, as well as bringing in covering the staff that we need, any staffing that's needed. That Mr. Moore has the budget.
All right, and I guess the next question is, in our PIT funds budget, is that money available, Bruce? Kathy,
The, obviously being in the pandemic, we have not been fully operational with our PIT dollars. I haven't looked to see if there's 233,000 basically all of it are allocated. It's just, will we spend all of it this year because of not being able to be fully operational with our programming? Probably not. So I would say that, and that's the other thing, we usually do visit with the CYF when we're talking about these. So if this had passed, then I would sit down with the CYF to kind of talk about developing that framework going forward.
and then Tom, a question for you on this, since we're specifically lining out a organization at a university, will we not have to make this a sole source? It would be subject to state bidding, just like we used to do with New Futures, correct?
Right. Director, Vice Mayor Hines, the thing's been read two ways, but Director Wright has made it clear about the location. So yes, there would need to be a sole source element to it, basically based upon a pilot aspect of a program, which is something the board's done in the past. Otherwise, it would have to be subjected to a competitive selection process.
Just my initial thoughts. I don't disagree that new approaches are not needed. I think we just need to make sure the funding's there, and to line out 7,000 off the top of our head, if we don't know it's there, I think would be a little.
My research has told me that it's there.
That's all the questions I have on that.
Mr. Moore, then we'll come to Director Phillips.
Well, Tom, basically.
One second. Just want to make sure we get the order. Mr. Moore will make some more comments on this particular item, then we'll go to Director Phillips and then to Director Webb.
So I just want to clarify, Tom, are you now going to restructure this into a sole source ordinance?
I think it has to be in light of the comment about the location at Arkansas Baptist as opposed to a program like that at Arkansas Baptist. And so I'll have to make that modification.
Tom, please pull your microphone closer to your face. And would you please repeat that?
You want me to repeat what I just said? We had read the ordinance that it would be a program like, as opposed to a program at Arkansas Baptist. And with the clarification today, then yes, there needs to be a sole source element to this ordinance based upon a pilot program, which y'all have done before.
All right, Director Phillips.
Mayor, I wanted to comment on number 25, 26, and 27, but I would like to defer to Director Webb if she had comments on 27, because I know she's our liaison to CYF. So if her comments was related to that, I'd like to wait and hear from her first.
Are your comments related to that, Director Webb? All right, Director Webb, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We discussed the budget at the CYF meeting.
Take your mask down.
We discussed the budget, community programs budget at the CYF meeting last week, that the budget was very tight. We also discussed that Dana and her staff are being asked to do more and more. One of the things they've been working on is preparing some documentation for members of CYF and therefore the board to take a look at what the needs of that department are. I'm reluctant to really make further comments because I would prefer for Dana, Director Dossett, to speak for herself, and maybe next week she'll be here and be able to address that.
Is she not here, Mr. Moore? I think she is here.
She had an emergency dental issue come up.
I apologize, Director. Well, I think, you still had some more comments? All right, so
No.
Director Webb.
May
Yeah,
I make
Director-
a request?
We have Director,
Okay,
we'll come to you, Director Phillips.
All right, thank you, Mayor. But again, Mayor, I was gonna talk about 25, 26, 27 kind of collectively. So if Director Wright has something directly in response to Director Webb, I'll defer to her.
All right, Director Webb, Director Wright, you now have the floor.
I would, Mr. Moore, I'm making a request, and I would like to break the PIT budget, to break down everything that's been allocated, because I know these programs were shut down, and I know that there's always carryover, because every time we're setting the budget, and PIT has always been reduced. First, it was reduced by the community schools, $700,000, and then various other things over the years. Now, that carryover money is always presented to us that the Department of Community Programs would have access to that money, and it would be reprogrammed back in to keep them at their 5.5 or $6 million allocation. Now, so I'd like to see all the carryover as it relates to every program that's been funded, that we approve for funding. And then in addition, I would like our finance department to provide me with a printout of the tax revenue that is generated that we put into PIT. And I believe I sent you something, Mr. Carpenter, or that asked you to get me the ordinance that authorized a PIT initially, and what is the percentage of tax that is that we're gathering that money from, because I want to see if it is the 6 million or if it's more than the 6 million. And if it's more than the 6 million, I want to know where the rest of the money is, because prevention, and that's what citizens are paying for. And they didn't elect the CYF commission, they elected us. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I'm trying to address a major issue in the African-American community, which I see as a crisis. Just like we asked and paid for IDs for our Latino commission, our community, there was none of this discussion. And we're talking about people dead in the grave. And I believe there were, what, 2 or 3 murders last week? And I'm very interested in seeing how this vote's gonna break down, because when it's election time, you need to explain to these people why you got all these questions about the death of young people that so far is totaling 18. And we're on track to exceed what we did last year. And to me, this should be a no-brainer.
I'd like to say 2 things. I think Director Richardson mentioned the staffing. One of the needs that Director Doucette and the community program staff has needed and wanted for quite some time as a data person. So that's been authorized. So someone will be coming on again to help evaluate programming and based on data. And that was part of the master plan, and that was supposed to be implemented by the 5th year. We're in the 4th year. Also, I would remind the board that the PIT allocation was reduced in 2021 as far as the overall budget. So There was some carryover, but the 2021 allocation was reduced.
I'd like to see that
We'll
spreadsheet.
provide.
Director Phillips, then Director Wyrick, then Director Adcock. And Richardson. And actually, it was Director Phillips, Richardson, Wyrick, then Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to kind of talk about this two different ways. That's why I kept deferring. And I'll start with 27, since that's where we are. City Attorney, did I understand you correctly to say that based on the discussion we heard today, that you would need to rewrite this ordinance?
27, yes.
Okay. And that's why I think this kind of dovetails with number 25. I always understood the agenda meetings, the opportunity for us to discuss the things that we're going to vote on the next week, would have an opportunity to review those things, whether they're handed to us or online. But with the caravan and ordinance, I hadn't seen that. With number 27, which are rewrite, I hadn't seen that. So I don't, and I know I'm new here, so maybe someone can explain this to me. Are we going to vote on something next week without seeing it this week? Is that the expectation?
Only if you waive the 3 readings and get to a vote. That'd be up to the board of directors.
Mr. Moore? Yeah, go ahead.
There's very few times that I will send out an agenda, as I did Friday, that says information forthcoming, because it does handicap you all to be able to review it before the meeting. And so I'm very cognizant of that. However, I thought these 2 items were important enough to go ahead and list with the titles on them, thinking that potentially we would have these by today. And that's happened in the past where I'll put information forthcoming on Friday, but they'll get sent out on Monday or Tuesday. So that I just typically don't send it out like that.
I understand that, and that's exactly, I think, I appreciate you sharing that, and that's to my point, which is if we don't have them, I don't know about my colleagues, but I don't want to vote on something or be inclined to vote on something without having the opportunity to review it. So that's what the caravan ordinance or the rewrite or number 27. As it relates to number 26, Director Richardson has already pulled that one down, so that's not really an issue anymore. But related to those 2, I mean, I would like to see the final draft of what we're going to vote on before next Tuesday at 6 p.m. and then say, make a decision about something that's very important to everyone who lives in the city. With that being said, I do understand Director Wright's point about the importance of doing something. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that I've been on both sides of these type of issues that have affected families. Losing family members to gun violence, having family members go to jail because of gun violence. So I understand their importance. So I know we need to do something. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I do want to understand what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And if I see the rewrite of the ordinance or the actual proposal, I'm not comfortable doing that. I know we need to do something. People should not be dying in our city. And I agree with Director Wright. We can't use what we did in the 90s in 2021. At my job, we don't use legal strategies from the 90s and 2021. That has to apply in how we operate the city. But until we see what that is, me personally, I'm not comfortable going forward and voting on either one of those things. And I'll leave it there, Mayor. Thank you.
Director Richardson. Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Director Phillips. I think that part of our problem has been we hadn't had that intermediary, Bruce, to kind of help us elevate our best practices and change our programming. And I think to Director Wright's point, I got, Mayor, one quick question and one comment. Now, Bruce, the future Little Rock sales tax in 1993 was responsible for the $3 million PIT funding, correct? Because prior to that, we tried several public safety sales tax, could not get them passed. So we strategically said, we're gonna match dollar for dollar PIT for each new police officers. And at that time, there was, I think, 135 police officers, 45 police officers a year for 3 years. And at that time, their cost was $3 million. It wasn't an arbitrary figure that we pulled out. Am I correct on that?
It's 3.2, correct?
3.2. So secondly, in 2008, during the recession, did we or did we not take $500,000 from PIT to help us adjust our budget?
We did.
We never did put that back, did we not?
Well, I would differ with that because in 2011,
From additional tax, and that was a separate amount. We never put the 500,000 that we pulled out during the recession of 2008, we never put that back in there.
correct, we went up, we doubled it in the sales tax to 5.5 million, correct?
That sales tax was for another $3 million, correct?
Correct.
So we never put it back. Not to be confrontational, we never put it back. But here's another point, which I think we need to be careful that we don't put you and the mayor on a tightrope, because this funding was not passed to pay for city staff. This funding was passed to enhance the opportunities for small community-based programs who didn't have the resources or capacity to get state funding or foundation funding, or were located in the heart of the community where these things were happening. They knew the community and the community knew them. So it was passed specifically to help fund those upcoming programs or nonprofits who couldn't receive funding from the state, the feds, or foundations. So I don't want us to get away from the fact that we might be on a slippery slope if we start talking about taking PIT funding and using that to pay for city staff.
Director Richardson, I believe earlier in the meeting, you said they were woefully understaffed.
I didn't say how we're going to pay for the staff, and they are. Yeah, I didn't say we pay that PIT. I believe they're roughly understaffed, but I don't want to get a slippery slope of taking PIT funding, which it was framed and couched as funding for community-based programming, not more city hall staff. I did say they were woefully understaffed. I didn't say let's tap into PIT and fund them. And Tom, I don't know legally what kind of position that would put us in, but I think it is a slippery slope, in my opinion.
That, that sales tax is a general fund sales tax. So, I mean, the decision could have been handled at all internally, and that decision was made to contract out with nonprofits, and I still think that's the right thing to do. But when you're administering $600 million to $7 million a year, you got to have adequate staff. I mean, the CYF and the city board, they want to see data. They want to see results. And it's hard to do that with a staff of 5. So I think that's, we're going in the right direction with that. But clearly the majority of the money, the prevention and intervention money, is still administered in the community.
Well, I guess my fear is that as we continually face these budget shortfalls, that PIT doesn't become the slush fund for us to make up these differences in terms of where we're coming up short. So I think that needs to be clearly defined. I think we need to understand that that was passed based on the announcement that we're going to have dollar for dollar for each new police officers. We're going to have a dollar for prevention, intervention, and treatment. And I think at that time, that amount came with about $3.2 million based on 135 new police officers over a 3-year period. And I don't want us, Mayor, to get into this point where we're looking at budget shortfalls and we're looking at PIT as a slush fund where we can go get it and make up funding from some other area. Because we never did put the $500,000 back that we took in 2008 due to the recession. We never put it back in there.
And I actually think this is a very good policy discussion. I think everyone has been able to share some different things. Mr. Moore, if you would just take some time with Dana to kind of review the funding and potentially some reprioritization, because that may be a situation as what we're hearing today. That PIT tax was passed when, Mr. Moore?
December 93.
And so while we've all known we've done some great work, there's some time for some new strategies. And not saying we make a decision today, I'm just saying this is overall just a policy discussion, and the recommendation may be that we're doing the right things, or it may say we need to sharpen our pencil in some other areas to address new things.
And if I could just say one thing, I don't want anyone here or listening to think that our programming has not evolved. It has, I mean, tremendously. And can we always do more? We can, and we always want to look at best practices but sometimes things don't work that might work in Baltimore, they might not work in Little Rock. So unique and evolve our programs. And I will tell you, having been here since starting here in the mid-90s, our programs have evolved, and we can show you what we were doing then and what we do now. And I think the CYF on a monthly basis gets updates on programming. So I know we talk a lot about, well, we got to do something different from the 90s. We are doing something different, and we have more partnerships with schools, and not an excuse, but obviously with the pandemic, we hadn't been as engaged with youth. We haven't, and I think that's hurt. That's hurt educationally. I think that's hurt them socially. And so anyway, we'll provide an update on that also.
All right, thank you so much. We'll now transition to Director Warwick, then Director Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to see the rewrite on number 27, and then also the original or the final one for item 25. On item 27, I've looked at the ordinance, and I don't see dollars in here for a budget, like how the budget's going to be broken down. Like, for instance, how much money is going to Arkansas Baptist College, and how much money is going to the church, and how many youth will be addressed with the $700,000? How are the youth approached to get into the program? Different information about that, I think, would be important. If this was going before the PIT, and Kathy can speak to this if she wants to, I think there'd be a lot of benchmarks that the PIT group would want to have in order to approve something through that commission. And I think we should have that to go along with this ordinance. So that would be my recommendations. Thank you.
Director Adcock.
Yes. The ID for Little Rock has been talked about twice this afternoon. The Little Rock ID is available for all residents of the city of Little Rock. It is not just for the Latinos, but it is for all residents of the city of Little Rock. And I in no way put this program or any other program before the lives of children and adults. I think that life is the most important thing that there is. So I just wanted to make that correction and that statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. So just want to, as we get ready to.
I did have my hand up, but.
Oh, sorry, Director Wright, I didn't see that.
Mr. Moore, I know you have the budget that was submitted to you. So however you choose to move forward, and Mr. Carpenter, making the changes that you said you need to make, how long would that take you? Do you think you could get that out to us tomorrow?
That's my goal.
Okay. So anyway, as I presented it, you can vote it up or you can vote it down, but at least I know I tried. Thank you.
All right, Director Phillips.
I do have a follow-up, but it looks like Director Hendricks was waving before me.
Director Hendricks. Director Hendricks.
I have been waiting for 15 minutes. I don't know what's wrong with your machine, but I just wanted to say also it was mentioned about the Hispanics getting whatever that was, but I was on this board in the 70s, and I can tell you those Hispanics caught more hell from Joan, and Elmer Hendricks protected those Hispanics. The other thing I want to say, I support what Director Wright had said 100%, and I don't think we need to drag our feet on getting this program started. That's what I got. I don't know why you can't see my hand ringing. What's happening? My hand's been going because Ken's been smiling at me.
Director Hendricks, as you know, my eyes are a bit challenged at times, so I do apologize.
Okay, love you just the same. Y'all can hear me.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So,
I think I was next, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's okay. I just want to get an understanding from, I know there have been a few different requests from board members. No, Director Wyrick just asked some questions about Ordinance 27. City Attorney, can you kind of give us an outline of what we can expect from you? I know not necessarily when to get it, but what should we expect to be in this rewrite of the ordinance? Based on, I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page on what we're going to get to review. I know Director Wyrick asked some questions about allocations, about the process through, you mentioned the sole source. There was also a discussion, I believe, about whether, how, the partnership aspect going through the CYF board is the normal way of doing things. I just want to understand what I'm gonna get when I'm reviewing this document, the draft ordinance.
Director Phillips, the best way to answer that is that Director Wright has put a great deal of work in this ordinance in terms of dealing with the sole source aspect. That's not going to be that much. In terms of the other matters, I would defer to Director Wright and will ask her before I send it out further because I think she needs to address those issues.
So you should have something by tomorrow for the board to review.
I said that was my hope. And
Well,
as my sainted mother says, hope springs eternal in the human heart.
Would it be helpful if I sent the actual proposal that I provided to Mr. Moore, and then you can read it?
and that's what I was gonna ask. I heard it was mentioned that there is a proposal. Can we see the proposal?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Moore has it, or I will forward it to you, to each of you.
I would like to see it. And last thing, Tom, I'm not familiar with the process, but maybe you can give me an explanation on how, and again, being a new guy, how programming is typically, how we are contracting with nonprofit agencies through CYF. If you can just get an explanation to me of that process, I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Director Wright, did you have your hand up? And
No,
Director Richardson?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Did you want me to say anything further, Mr. Carpenter?
No.
No.
the only thing I would say, Mayor, is that I agree something needs to be done. I think my concern is that we're doing the right thing with the right people. I don't want us to do anything symbolically just to say we're doing something. I think we need to reach the right people and we need to be doing the right thing that's research-based. It's something that we're using best practices and we have the adequate people in the community who know the community that may not have the best work history, but know how to reach out, engage, recruit, and enrich and empower those young adults. And I'm talking about us moving past that 13 to 19 age group, Mayor and Bruce. I'm talking about that transition to adulthood group, that disconnected adult and youth group, 18 to 24, 18 to 25. So I'm agreeing with Director Wright. We need to do something. I want us to be more cautious and more thoughtful about what it is we're doing and who we're doing it to and with. So that's the last thing I say about that. And that's based on many years of working with gang intervention programs, youth employability programs, but being out in the community and knowing that something needs to be done. And this is not the first time this has come up here and come from me. And Tom, my last question is, would there be a conflict of interest if Director Wright wrote a proposal and presented it for us to vote on?
Director Richardson, I don't see how the conflict of interest would come if she wrote proposals that said she got paid a bunch of money to do something, and I doubt that's in there.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, let me.
Yes, Director.
respond.
And Director Hendricks is waving her
I
hand.
actually got a letter here that was given to me at my desk here when I got here, and I meant to mention this. This from somebody in prison talking about our issues that we're having in our community and asking to help. And I do want you to know that the Research Center at Arkansas Baptist has a board, an advisory board. They also have a network of people in the community that are have stepped forward in order to help with this. But what I submitted to Mr. Moore for his review and consideration, I will send to you all. And I keep hearing you say, yeah, we need to do something, somebody needs to do something. Well, nobody's done anything. So I come forward with this, and then it gets like, okay, all of these holes that everybody wants to fill, but nobody has any answers. Nobody has any plans. So I'm going to stand firm on it. And as I said, you all look these voters in the face and these mothers that have lost their children that were down here with all these photographs and tell me that if this was happening in the white community, you all would move, and you would move swiftly. And I'm just going to put it out there.
Thank you, Director Wright. Director Phillips.
If we're still, I was gonna move on, Mayor. I don't know if we had any more comments from the board about item 27.
No, sir. I don't think there are any more questions about item 27. Oh, 1 second, Director Phillips. Director Hendricks, I see you now. Sorry.
Okay, the thing that I wanted to say, with the UAMS, all of the work that's going out there with this program that they have and sponsored by the city, I have received a call from 2 minority contractors, and I think that you may be hearing from them because they are not hiring minorities, those contractors. And that's my money and yours money, and I'll be darned if I'm going to sit here and be quiet. So minority contractors need to be on that UAMS job out there where all that money is being spent. So if you need some black contractors, just let me know and I'll send you some. But you're going to get a hearing from Thomas. He called me this morning in tears that he has made application and has been turned down. Now, Mr. Moore and the mayor, please get busy and put some minorities out there on that job. That's UAMS.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Moore, is she referring to UMS's funding, not city funding?
Correct. I assume she's referring to that groundbreaking that was yesterday.
Oh,
No,
yesterday's.
are they not hiring people? Aren't they connected somehow?
I'll visit, Director Hendricks, what I'll do when I leave this meeting, I'll visit with one of the vice chancellors that does a lot of the strategic investments, and I'll follow up with you.
Okay, thank you now. I'm speaking for the people. I'm not here for myself.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do that follow-up. Director Phillips.
I like what Director Hendricks just said. She said she's speaking for the people. She's not here for herself. I may steal that, Director Hendricks. So if you hear me say that, you know I got that from you. I want to talk about number 28, which is our sales tax. Last week, I asked the board, I want to hear from my colleagues if they had any thoughts about it. And today I'm asked kind of a little more pointed question. We spent, a better part of this meeting talking about youth violence, which isn't appropriate. And I appreciate the discussion. Mayor, I would like you to have someone, I don't know exactly who that will be, but to address how this tax will address some of these kind of, wraparound issues that we see in certain communities that Director Richardson and Director Wright were speaking on, that, lead people to make the option to commit these type of crimes. So if there are things in the sales tax that address some of these wraparound services, whether it's education related or public safety related, I would like to make sure that we have that in the public record.
Yes, and actually, every board member, we do want to do a bit of a timeline. The members of the board received a presentation on the Rebuild the Rock sales tax proposal of a 1 cent tax that will essentially, because of the 3/8 cent sales tax, falls off on December 31st of this year. We will essentially move, if it passes by this board and passes by the people, it will transition from 8.62% to 9.625%. That's that's knowing that the 3/8 cent sales tax will fall off on December 31st. And so that's where you get that 1 percentage point, but technically it is 0.625%. So that being said, we did a presentation on March the 25th. On April the 26th, the city attorney passed out on my behalf the 2 ordinances, which are items 28 and 29. At that point in time, we also shared the proposal of those dollars and listening to particular members of the board. We increased some dollars, particularly with public safety and public infrastructure. Definitely want to give credit to those members of the board for that advice and counsel, where we did accept that and increase that from that standpoint. As you look through the documentation of those dollars, definitely want to take time to applaud Director Wright and her passion and her willingness to develop a plan to address youth violence. This rebuild, the rock sales tax, actually complements everything that Director Wright has shared with her vision for youth, because it has an ardent focus on quality of life and place, small business development, public safety, public infrastructure, early childhood education, and understanding of the things that we need to do as a city to truly invest in ourselves as we're all coming out of a global pandemic that has forced us all to be separated, forced us all to be inward, to have a greater understanding for the need and the rationale for wraparound services as it relates to mental health, and understanding what we need to do as a community to truly rebuild our city coming out of the pandemic. With that being stated, we'll have, first, if we can have, one of the things that I think we also have not addressed is affordable housing. And so if Director Howard would just give us a brief reason why we see that funding in there for affordable housing, but we'll be utilizing these dollars to also augment what he's already doing within CBDG in addressing weed lots, addressing dilapidated homes that we can acquire and redevelop. Director Howard, you just give us a brief reason of why.
Yes, Mayor. There are several reasons why we do have a shortage of affordable housing at the city of Little Rock. In the city of Little Rock, also we have the need to address homelessness around the city of Little Rock. We do have a lot of requests that we receive on an annual and a day-to-day basis, requesting that we have more housing for the homeless. And also we do have requests for more housing, for affordable housing for people that are below the 80% of the area median income. And currently, right now, we don't receive enough money under CDBG and Home Investment Partnerships Program to address these needs throughout the city of Little Rock.
Thank you so much, Director Howard. Dr. J. Barford, would you give a brief synopsis of the early childhood education program?
Thanks, Mayor. And
also how that will augment some of the things in addition to Director Wright's ordinance, because I see this as a way to add on to what she's referring to.
Yeah, and I'll respond to Director Phillips' question directly. I mean, I think we all know that getting students, young people, off to the best start possible is the best strategy for in the generations to come, really beginning to ameliorate some of these trends that we see in our community. And early childhood education, especially when it starts early, has a proven track record of really reducing violent crime over the long haul. It doesn't happen immediately. It is really a multi-generational approach. And that's why this package really puts a focus on 0 to 2 in particular, infant and toddlers. And we know in our community, below 200% of poverty, only about 17% of those children have access to high quality early childhood experiences. And so we need to enhance the number of those experiences, but also increase the number of vouchers that are available for those families to take children to those high quality providers. And high quality providers are those providers that really have a great understanding of child development, of how to respond to adverse childhood experiences at a very early age, so that those children really get off to a start that is really filled with hope and love and caring, which I think is a crucial component of early childhood experiences. Obviously, we don't stop there. We can't stop there. It doesn't all magically happen in the first 2 years, but we do know how much of brain development happens in those first 2 years of life. And getting it right there allows us to build on it with high quality pre-K, other educational experiences like our community schools program, and then of course building up to experiences that really prepare students for life after high school, college, and career. I think it's also another important piece of the program is the 529 plans that I know you care deeply about. which I think is crucially important in preparing students to think about life after education. And I think that a lot of the conversation tonight has been about young people who have lost hope. And what we need to do is that we need to insert hope early in children's lives so that they begin to focus not just on what their future is going to be, but where they're going to go to college, what their career is going to be. And the 529 Savings Plan says, we as a community are investing in your future because it's in the interest of our future as a community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barth.
Thank you.
John Honeywell, if you'll come share and explain, as we share with the board members on the spreadsheet that we passed out last week, that we did increase the public infrastructure where we have in the first 10 years, 20 million for strategic infrastructure improvements. If you'll kind of share and highlight how that would help, areas, whether it be flooding in Ward 7, drainage issues in Ward 3, road issue, particular strategic road improvements in Ward 6 and Ward 5, and then also infrastructure issues from Wards 1 and 2. But just give a brief synopsis.
I think you covered it, Mayor. Thank you. So as y'all know, we've had a capital program as part of our current sales tax that is sunsetting at the end of this year. This funding that's proposed will help us continue that program that we've been doing. We will be looking at a more targeted approach with this funding, like the mayor said, to projects that we haven't necessarily been able to address as part of this first funding program that we've been in. So we'd like to target some of the bigger projects that we haven't been able to do, specifically some of the drainage issues, Ward 3, some of the transportation issues we have in west, southwest, where we need to upgrade roads to accommodate existing congestion that we have. Examples, Canis, Bowman Road running north and south, all the way down to Colonel Glenn. We're also looking at the ability to address and improve road and infrastructure related to other areas of the city where we help to revitalize those areas by encouraging redevelopment, where that transportation improvement can help with, in a sense of selling those areas for people to come back in and reinvest by the city making investments in the infrastructure in those areas. So that's just a short synopsis of what we'd like to try to do with that funding that's being allocated for us.
Thank you. I also want to share with the board, that was on the strategic infrastructure. There's also another close to 42 million in the first 10 years for street resurfacing. And like in the past, those dollars will be split evenly amongst wards. So that brings that total in the first 10 years, 63 million, which is annual 6.4 million a year. But Mr. Moore, I do know you always want to remind the board and myself about the infrastructure bonds, if you could do that, which is separate and apart and has nothing to do with this tax.
Correct. As the board would remember, Director Phillips wasn't here, but after the 2011 sales tax, we passed the 2012 bond refunding that gained 115 million, I believe. It was a 15-year bond issue. We typically pay those off year 12, year 13. So we're scheduled to pay those off in the spring of 2022. So we would be coming back to you all, hoping to call an election to renew that those 3 mills that are levied for capital improvements.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Susan Altru, if you'll come give us a brief synopsis again. We know we've been discussing since March 25th, but want to make sure you have opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Board, for the opportunity to speak. Obviously, there is a lot of important things at stake with this tax, and the zoo is one of those. I think when you look at what we have listed and you see giraffes at $20 million, it seems like a large figure. But that actually is a large improvement for the zoo and does more than just giraffes. It's $20 million that renovates a large portion of the zoo, and it does a lot more than just giraffes. It's a multi-species habitat, and like I said, is going to be a large renovation. It creates a giraffe feeding deck and also a feeding area for rhinos. It's going to add a new splash pad at the zoo. It's also going to add new food service areas, a new special event space, and an education building area for us to do educational programming, and also allow us to renovate our parking areas and add new trails and bike paths that we can link to War Memorial Park, which is a very important part of the plan, because the Parks Department has also placed in their plan some renovations to the area that is north of the zoo, where those 3 golf course holes used to exist. And this is important because the additional revenue from this tax is also going to allow us to do some important things. It's going to allow us to provide free school field trips for every child in Little Rock. Also, it will allow us to do quarterly free days for Little Rock residents, and also to increase our education programming for Little Rock schools. And these are all things that we've really wanted to do to increase access for Little Rock residents, something that we think we desperately need to do. And zoos are very important. You know, when you talk about zoos and you talk about learning about animals, there is a lot of research out there that shows when you learn about animals, it increases compassion, it increases our ability to care. And the more that we can teach children about animals and about caring at a young age, that's a great thing and a great benefit for our community. And the more that we can provide access to our zoos for our families, that's a great thing for our community too, because our zoo is a center place. It's a place where all of our families can come together and can be in a recreational opportunity together. Our zoo task force found that the zoo has major infrastructural needs. We have an old WPA building, old exhibits that don't meet modern zoological design, narrow pathways that don't make sense. We have a lack of storage, facilities, and services that don't work. And we also have a zoo hospital that needs upgrades and a new commissary that needs updating. The renovation of the zoo is a part of the revitalization of the War Memorial Park as a whole. And so it doesn't make much sense if we're going to revitalize War Memorial Park and not also revitalize the zoo too. Also too, this week we're going to be releasing an economic impact study that shows there is a significant impact when you invest in the zoo to the local economy here in Little Rock. We'll be able to get our money back, sometimes almost tenfold, by investing in the zoo. It makes sense for us to invest in our zoo here in Little Rock because it creates jobs. It creates additional revenue that we can then reinvest back into our local community. And I hope that you'll be looking forward to seeing that study because it's quite impressive. The firm that we hired to do this was even shocked to see just what an impact it made just for such a small little zoo in a town like ours. They couldn't believe the numbers they got back. And in conclusion, taking a look at the zoo and taking a look at the impact we have a real opportunity here. It's an opportunity that we probably might not have in the future. If we act now, it's an opportunity that we can really create something great, and something great in the center of our city, in the heart of War Memorial Park. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. Mr. John Eckert, will you come discuss the projects that are part of quality of life, which is 34% of this that incorporates things from War Memorial, Hyman Park, all the existing parks and the youth sports complex and other highlights?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the board. This tax, this Rebuild the Rock initiative is going to be truly transformative for our park system in our city. We have, as we sit, we have a great park system. Infrastructure is there, but it is aged. This will allow us to not only fix the holes in major facilities that we have, such as the 9 to 10 court basketball, volleyball facility, swimming pools, baseball, youth sports complex, softball complex. Improve our soccer offerings, 12 field facility at Redmond, improve Otter Creek Park, improve natural steps. a senior center, which has been a really key point of focus from our task force on aging. We'll now have a senior center in the city of Little Rock that will rival any. Our playgrounds, we'll be able to fix our 18 parks that we have, 63 of them throughout the city of Little Rock. And this will increase our ability to not only improve the quality of life for our residents, but also allow us to our opportunity to increase our sports tourism and to have Willow and Hyman Parks be our cornerstones of our park system.
Can you speak to the senior center?
Yes, sir. So the Task Force on Aging has been working over the last year and a half, 2 years, going to different communities, looking at what they have. And this is their primary concern and the primary ask is to develop a senior center in our city. And the proposal is to add on to the center at University Park to develop a senior center that has therapy pool, has fitness area for senior specific programming. It's located in an ideal location in the center of the city.
And I think we'll be making a decision pretty shortly to transition some of the senior programming at West Central over to Center University Park as well.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Chief Hubbard. And Chief Hubbard, if you would also just kind of give an update on just some fire infrastructure decisions that have been made. I want to share that with the board that are coming up.
Sure. So one of our biggest concerns, one of our biggest challenges in fire is the aging of our apparatus, the fleet inventory, the condition thereof. And just according to National Fire Protection Association standards in which we're governed by, once a fire truck is of a certain age, we have to move it from frontline to reserve. Whereas we currently stand, the importance of, as I stated, as the importance of this tax incentive is to put in place a replacement plan for those apparatuses. When you see one of those fire trucks, that's a $750,000 purchase. When you see the longer ladder trucks, that's a $1.4 million purchase. Where we're currently at now, we're in dire need of a replacement plan and this will allow us to execute that replacement plan. The mayor has given us permission to move forward. We have one fire truck now that is 28 years of service that we're looking to replace. He has granted us permission to move forward on the purchase of a replacement for that. With this particular replacement plan, we would then be able to execute so many fire trucks being replaced and moved from frontline to reserve status. And then after 5 years of being in reserve, then completely removed from our inventory altogether. But this tax also will give us opportunity. We know we are in need of a fire station in the western portion of the city. As this city continues to move annex west, we do know we need a fire station there. The fire station, the closest fire station to the western region is a 9-minute response. And that's beyond the 4-minute response time that is mandated by the National Fire Protection Association Center. So this 1 cent tax will benefit fire and our ability to respond in adequate, sufficient equipment, as well as location to impact that community out west, as far as having a fire station readily there to respond versus relying on possible mutual aid of a neighboring fire protection agency.
Thank you so much. Mr. Moore, if you'll speak to the turnout strategy. I know, make sure the board members are aware of our turnout strategy.
Correct. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, we adopted a 4-year plan on the second set of turnouts. The dollars have been identified for this year and are moving forward with purchasing the additional second set of turnouts this year.
Thank you so much.
that purchase, to Mr. Moore's point, that purchase will cover, uh, 3/4 of the job will be in a second set of turnouts after that purchase.
Thank you so much. Chief Humphrey, if you come speak to the dollars that'll be used within LRPD for the 21st century community policing operations for more police officers as well as technology.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So one of the things that we talked about is 21st century policing. We finally have a dedicated division, 21st century policing division, that focuses on community programs, crime prevention, youth programs, and other community-oriented programs. So our main focus, one of the things that we're going to do, as you all know, we're going to hire a full-time social worker. This would allow us to add on to that program with Director Wright's talking about and what we've talked about today. One of the biggest things that we're going to be able to do is when we recognize that there are youth that are having problems, instead of trying to say, well, that's just the youth and that's not our problem, we can field a team of social workers and other professionals that can get down to the root of what the actual cause is. We're focusing on how do we talk about violence and having the funding and the resources to look at this as a somewhat of a public health issue and bring the resources together from other agencies and come up with long-term programs to assist. One of the other things that we've been talking about is continuing to ensure that our fleet is up to date. We want to talk about how do we manage artificial intelligence. Everyone has heard that word, but artificial intelligence is the thing that's helping police departments become more and more efficient and proficient. And basically, it digs a little bit deeper than what our current technology allows to do, which is important before the calls come in, during the calls, and after the calls. It digs deeper to get additional information that allows officers to be more proficient and see what these problems are so that we might be able to address and also deploy other resources. So our technology is going to be one. Our community response is going to be a big part of it. And so we're excited about the opportunity. Another thing that we've talked about is a real-time crime center. Not necessarily building a facility, but providing the officers with a cell phone that will allow them to see what's actually going on in that area that they patrol in real time. So as the information is being pumped into the system, it's being pushed out to the officers. They don't have to wait until the next day to talk to the crime analysts. They're getting the information real time, which we believe is going to be critical in addressing some of our problems. So those are just a few of the things, but when we talk about community engagement, we believe that social workers, which will allow us to come up with a larger community plan when it comes to our homeless community, when it comes to crime, whether it's juvenile or adult crime, and also our mental health consumers, putting together a long-term resource that will allow us to address that.
Thank you so much. Director Linehan, if you would come approach and just briefly just kind of give an outlook, and we can definitely go into detail if we ever have to get to this point, but just to share with the members of the board how much this tax accrues, and then in addition, if this board was to choose not to move forward, what are the things that we have to begin making decisions on because of the 3.8 sales tax coming off? And while you're coming up, I do want to just give you some credit as we've been looking through a number of different financial things over the last couple of years. One of the things that you stressed that as we look to go over this particular sales tax is that we do not plan for growth. We plan for it to be flat. So in the event that the growth does not meet its expectations, we're able to meet our expectations as best as possible, as we've seen in the previous tax that growth was a part of it and the growth didn't show up. And so certain things weren't able to always meet that dollar amount.
That's correct. There are a couple of things about this tax and the way it's structured that are important with the roll-off of the 3/8 cent. In the last several years, things that previously were considered capital are no longer necessarily capital investments. We've seen that primarily with our fleet, with various leases trying to keep the fleet fresh and turn over regularly. And so we're not purchasing the vehicles to stay with the city forever. We're turning that over, and those don't meet some of the capital requirements. The other issue is IT. So much of our IT that in the past was a capital purchase, and under state law, we can only borrow or do, it's only considered capital if you have tangible personal property. Well, with most of the IT being in a cloud or more of an intangible nature, those things we cannot finance. And so our core internet, all the different things that we use for our IT, which is fundamental primarily in public safety, that's where our largest IT investment is, those are now considered operating. So we need to have the flexibility to shift those purchases or consider those as operating as opposed to capital, which is part of the reason why we're not doing a separate capital tax. To speak to the mayor's comments about the growth that we had projected, we thought we were being very conservative when we forecast an average annual growth of 2% a year, because prior to the sales tax and prior to the recession that we experienced in 2008, we were seeing growth of 3-4% a year. That diminished. There were a couple of years where we did exceed our 2%, but for the most part, and when I do my financial report later today, you'll see over the years how we did not achieve that 2%. And so the projects that we accelerated with short-term financing, primarily our public safety related projects in the early years, got their full allocation of funding. Most of the projects that went on a pay-as-you-go nature are going to end up, the latest forecast is 95.25% of their funding. And that's just because that we allocated every dollar that came in, but we did not meet our 2% per growth forecast. So just like when you're forecasting revenues for a bond issue or anything else, we want to make sure that what we're using, we've looked at the average collection that 1 cent has brought us over the last 3 years, which is just at $53 million. We're going to use that as the basis. If we see growth above that, that gives us funds to be more flexible. Needs change, additional priorities come up, and we'll be able to utilize it for those purposes. Obviously, the board approves expenditures over $50,000, so you have quite a bit of say in how any excess is expended. But if we keep that forecast, assuming $53 million a year, we know that we can meet the commitments that we set out for in those 10-year periods that we're talking about. Is there anything else, Mayor?
No, ma'am. Thank you so much. Mr. Moore, do you have any comments before we go to the members of the board?
Just to point out that because the decision was made to move up all of the mainly public safety projects, even though the funding came in at 95%, we project, we still will have accomplished every project that this board committed to. And I think that's important to note. I do think we were being fiscally conservative then, but we didn't know. Obviously, predicting the next 10 years was tough. But I think overall, and that's the message that I think when we do talk about this is we've accomplished everything we promised, and now we've got a new set of priorities and a new set of needs.
Thank you so much. I believe we have Vice Mayor Hines, then Director Wright.
Thank you. Mayor, one of the questions I've been getting is, as I understand it, the $38 million we're getting from the American Rescue Plan funds, some of that could be used for some of these projects. And I was just wondering if when you're going to get with the board on what the plan to allocate that money is, because it's a question I'm getting from a lot of folks. Or why are we asking for a sales tax when we've got $38 million coming in over the next 2 years through the American Rescue Plan?
Yes, we're still waiting. Actually, I was on a phone call with the White House today. They do not expect to have the final guidance until sometime in May, I do believe. Director Cox will also share some of her guidance that she's received from some of the associations that she's a part of. But right now, so the members of the board are aware, while it's broad guidance, there's only so many things. It's $37 million one-time funding, not $53 million annually. So that's one difference on those particular things. I would like to share, as you look at item number 6, it's actually not on. We'll come back to that. It's not there on that one. But we would like to share, we are actively looking at a number of different projects to do private philanthropic partnerships, and you'll see that in the coming days on some things. As it relates to the $37 million, just for what we know has already been reported right now, members of the board, the dollars can be used for revenue replacement for municipalities. So the city can use those dollars to replace any impacted revenues, franchise fees that we can tie to that. So that's number one. Number two, it could be used for revenue replacement as it relates to transportation, tourism, and hospitality. So if you all will remember, led by Director Kevin Howard during the COVID surplus money, we were able to administer a small business emergency assistance program where we gave out $5,000 forgivable grants to gig economy entrepreneurs that were somewhere between 0 to 25 based on the CBDG guidelines, Community Development Block Grant. That's what CBDG stands for those that are watching. And so we were able to issue those dollars. And so there is a thought that we may do something similar as it relates to our restaurateur community and others that are part of that hospitality from that standpoint. Thirdly, these dollars can be utilized for infrastructure and infrastructure improvements, whether they are water, defined as sewer, as well as we're still getting some guidance if roads could be a part of it, but it specifically says water, sewer, and broadband. But we are hearing that they are using the word infrastructure to be comprehensive to include roads. But as Director Honeywell will share, unless you're going to use all the money towards a specific set of roads, that we may not get as far as we can. However, he is looking at some different things, on some patchwork things that we can get done from that standpoint. And then finally, as it ties to job creation. And so as it relates to kind of the park standpoint, we're getting guidance on how, if it can be tied to that. That's something that has been a thought, but as of right now, it's really specific to job creation, water, sewer, infrastructure from a standpoint of dealing with those things. So we have looking into that. Myself, our CFO, Director Linehan, and Mr. Moore, we're all reviewing. As we have done with the COVID money, we will provide a proposal on how those dollars should be spent, and we'll get that as soon as we get more guidance. But until we get the guidance, we wanted to make sure we knew all this, because some things may change. We may think that something is in compliance and something may not be. And that's one of the things, because we want to ensure, because there are some compliance mechanisms. If you spend this money the wrong way, we could get a reprimand. And so that's the reason why we should know, just so the board members are aware, until we get that guidance, when we receive those dollars, we should receive, I believe, half of the $37 million within the first 60 days of when the act passed. And the act passed close to 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Director Linehan, unless some money has been deposited today, we haven't received half of that yet. And then the other half we'll receive, and they don't define when we will receive it, but within the next 2 years. And so it gets pretty thin from that standpoint when you look at it half blocks. And so it kind of ties our hand on some of those things. Next question, Director Hines, Vice Mayor Hines. Right. And we'll be sure, Vice Mayor Hines, to get you some more information on that as we get it as well. Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate having a chance to express some concerns that I have about this tax. What I'm getting a lot about from my constituents is, contrary to what Mr. Moore declared, we did not complete all the projects that we promised. West Central did not get its pool. We did not get a police substation out west. As a result of that, not getting the substation out west, my area is now lumped into Southwest Little Rock. But I have a precinct on Canis. The people on Canis, people in that area, when they call that Northwest precinct, they're told they have to call Southwest. I'm getting a lot of negative feedback from the public about that. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Second of all, as I said, we did not get the pool.
Mr. Moore, you want to speak to that?
There's nothing to say. There's no pool. So now, I'm not gonna argue with you. There's no pool.
There was $6 million that was allocated for the West Central Complex. The board passed a resolution and it said West Central Complex, $6 million. And we spent a little bit more than $6 million at the complex.
Mr.
And
Moore.
That's facts, Director, right?
It was $6 million for a community center and pool. You came back and said there were cost overruns and that the pool had to be taken out. When you had that issue at 12th Street, you came back to the board and got an additional $3 million and put it in the 12th Street station. You did not make any attempts to do anything to add to that pool. I've had a thorough analysis done of the plans for that facility, and we were overcharged for that facility. The size was cut from 40,000 square feet to 24,000 square feet. So we got a whole lot less than what we were promised. Now, I would like to continue with my concerns here. We've got 34% in Parks and Recreation. And I heard Mr. Eckert say something about sports tourism. Well, you know, I've been focused on that for 15 years, trying to bring an anchor into that barrel corridor to kind of stabilize and get the kids involved and engaged in team sports. And I believe we've been very successful. In our last season, we had 52 teams in our baseball program and 48 in the basketball program. And I want to just pass this picture down, Lance, so that they can see. And in all of this time, I know Mr. Eckert came, in 2018? And there's been no effort to make any improvements in the baseball park. The city acquired that park from the Optimist for $1. And the promise was made to the Rosedale Optimist Club that baseball would always exist there to honor their legacy. There was a master plan developed and designed professionally by Struck and Associates. And there was a pro forma analysis conducted by Finnegan and Associates. And I believe, and I know that I am correct, that the city paid close to $50,000 for those two documents. And they've been pretty much ignored by everyone except me. And when I presented to Mr. Moore what I would like to see at West Central, all they had in there was a pool. Now, we have a private individual who is going to bring improvements to Rebsamen Tennis Center, so that was actually taken out, and I believe that was added to West Central. Now, the master plan always included additional basketball facilities, football field, upgrading the baseball fields, and of course, the pool was already supposed to be there. So now, out of this allocation, I have to get the pool done. Not going to be able to add on, upgrade the ball fields or add the football field because we want our basketball facility because we have a lot of team sports that go on out there. And our goal was always to be the destination for youth sports. That's not acknowledged by Mr. Eckert or his staff. And I for one have been extremely frustrated in dealing with our Parks Administration with regards to this facility and trying to honor the promises that were made to the Rosedale Optimists. Mr. Carpenter was there when we negotiated this deal. He was very helpful in dealing with that group of people because this was something that they developed over the years. And the picture that I just passed around to you was of one of the dugouts that have been there since the 1950s. And Mr. Eckert never saw fit to upgrade those or make any attempt to upgrade those.
Mayor,
Let me finish what I'm saying. Please don't interrupt me. I have tried to talk with you and to get you to help get some improvements done. And now I'm bringing it before the board. Okay? So I'm just expressing to you my frustration, my concern, because all of the questions that I have been asking, attempts to get funding to upgrade over there, because you know the usage that's there. Your son has played there. And what I'm finding is that we're going to add on to First Tee, buy 15 acres downtown for $5 million, add 13.5 to Rebsamen Soccer, and all of these kind of things, but we can't finish what was promised at West Central. And you have seen the track record of what we have been able to achieve. And these are kids they can't get to War Memorial because they don't have transportation. So I'm asking that you've got this money allocated in parks. I'm asking for the money to be allocated to, in addition to what's there, to upgrade our ball fields and add the football field. Now, some of my other concerns, Mayor, with what you have is public safety, our COPP officers. We still don't have them. And then infrastructure. I don't have any specificity on how I can address community streets. Now, everything I've heard sounds good, but there is no specificity as to how I can address neighborhood streets. And Mr. Moore was here prior to you coming, of course, but there's a couple called the Yanceys. They used to come down to the board meeting every month to ask that question, and I still can't answer it, even with this asking them to pay another sales tax. And Mayor, I have some serious concerns with early childhood education. I do not believe that that is something that we should be allocating funds for. It's a state and a federal issue that they address. They have much more money than we do. I would be much more comfortable if the money were put into our infrastructure and into our public safety, which is specifically what we are charged with doing as a municipality. I'm fine with affordable housing and information technology. I'm fine with neighborhood programs. My issues are with the parks and recreation, the golf and the fitness, and the early childhood and infrastructure. And I also want, like I said, I want to see COPP officers, and I want to see some type of programming in our parks, because we have no programming right now. And I think that we need to take measures to address safety in our parks. I'm not hearing that in all of this wonderful presentation that everybody is getting up making. And I like the zoo. I got 2 giraffes in my house. I can show you the pictures.
Actual giraffe?
But they're statues, but I got people that can't get to the zoo. I got kids that can't get to the zoo. So the zoo is not my first priority, but they can get down the street to their neighborhood park. They're going to use that neighborhood park a whole lot more than they're going to go to War Memorial. So as it's written here, I want my constituents to know I've taken pains to express why, because I need my constituents to know that I will not be supporting this tax as it is structured right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Wright, for sharing your feedback. As we share with the board, this is something that we've taken better part of a year and a half to craft and going through different community organizations to help develop this. But we do appreciate your feedback and understand where you have to do. But again, I want to share with the board that if this tax is not passed, there will have to be financial adjustments. But I definitely appreciate your feedback. That being said, I think we now I wanted to make sure we had all of the time to give to this, as we said, on March the 25th. Reason why we are setting the clock on this, because we do have timelines as we move towards a what I would consider as a clock to do a sales tax from this standpoint. And so we are setting the clock. That's the reason why we wanted to start on March 25th, to have the number of types of opportunities for the members of the board to express their opinion, to give opportunity for myself, Mr. Moore, and Director Linehan to adjust where we can adjust. That's why we like this kind of feedback. We'll do our best to adjust if there's opportunity. But if not, the decision remains, do we decide to invest in our city's potential? And if this board decides not to, we do know that the 3/8 sales tax rolls off, and so we'll move to 8.62%, and we'll have to make certain financial adjustments. And just wanted to be clear from that standpoint, but we are going to continue to listen to the feedback and then move from that standpoint. So we'll have, it's on the agenda for April the 20th. We'll continue to work to address feedback that is shared. And for a hopeful vote on the 20th. If not, having a hopeful vote on the 20th, we'll utilize a special meeting method. But we do have a clock that we have to move forward on.
Mayor.
Director Richardson.
Yes, thank you. Just one last point, and it's not tied to a single issue or a single focus related to the tax or how we move forward, whether the 12th Street station or the zoo or a particular park and or golf course. I do want to make the point that we spent a substantial amount of time talking about violence tonight. And I think that you made reference to me working in the music business, and I think Cameo had an old song back in the mid-'80s and talked out of both sides of your neck. And I think in terms of those of us who never heard that song, that suggests that the hypocrisy of our democracy suggests that we always say public safety is our #1 priority. We say we're not going to tolerate crime, but yet we'll tolerate the conditions that produce those crimes. I think that's the hypocrisy of our democracy. We're not going to tolerate crime, but we're going to tolerate these conditions that produce the social ills that produce the crime. I think also we do ourselves a disservice when we narrow crime down to the lowest common denominator. Crime is much more than people shooting at each other. There's economic violence, there's political violence, there's social violence, there's racial violence. We're talking about violence. Violence is much larger than two people shooting at each other in the park. So I think, Chief Hubbard, thank you for your leadership, sir. But I think you will agree with me, putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound is not going to solve the gunshot wound. So we do ourselves a disservice when we minimize violence to just people shooting at each other. I mean, there's economic violence, there's social violence, there's racial violence, there's political violence. These things just don't happen without other things that kind of create conditions for those young people to play out, those people who are disconnected, play out some of the things in their community. So if we were talking about violence, just talking on a larger scale, a broader scale than just talking about two people shooting at each other. Because it's bigger than that, man. And with that, on the sales taxes, you can give me a Learjet, I'll support it.
Thank you so much for your support, Director Richardson, and really do appreciate that. I know you understand a lot of these things help many things you've been fighting for the years. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address a few different things that's been brought up. First, the conversation about the ARP money from a legal perspective. I know we all bring our own experiences to this board, and my experiences as a lawyer. And when we were helping our clients in 2020 utilize and receive PPP dollars, we learned after the fact that, hey, there may be some parameters that come out after you get the money. So we had clients coming back to us saying, oh, what do we do now with this new guidance? Because we sometimes move too fast once we got the dollars. So we, as their lawyers, had to try to figure things out on the fly because the guidance was coming out on the fly. I think that same logic should be applied to the city. As we get these dollars, we need to make sure we know how we can spend these dollars. So I wanted to make sure we share that with you, Mayor, so you can share it with the staff. As it relates to the sales tax, I want to appreciate Director Altrury for clarifying the giraffe issue. I received emails, and I think some of my board members were copied on the emails where people like $20 million for giraffes. That's a lot. So I appreciate adding context about the exhibit that is more than just giraffes and kind of reformational for the zoo as a whole. I mentioned this before, but I want to reiterate it. In 2016, I was fortunate enough to be a co-chair of a group called Think Big Little Rock. And that group was over 100 young professionals who spent a year and a half. We met monthly to discuss what we want our city to look like. What do we need to do to make sure we're planning for the future and that people want to live here, they want to stay here, they want to move here. Two of the biggest tenets of our program, and if you don't believe me, go check it out, thinkbiglittlerock.com, shout out, is the revitalization of War Memorial Park and the investment in early childhood education, because that's important to young families. And those things are in this tax. So now I'm talking not only to my colleagues, but to the members of Think Big Little Rock and other people who see the world the way we do. Those are things that are important to a huge segment of our population. Now we have an opportunity to address those things. And to Director Richardson's point, he said a couple things today that I think are worth reiterating. He talked about it's not about red and blue, it's about green when it relates to violence issues. He just said that we need to, because I take notes when y'all talk. He just said we need to change the conditions of our city to make sure we don't put people in a situation where they feel like crime or violence is an option. I think this tax allows us to change the tone, the tenor, the outlook of our city and address some of those needs through early childhood education specifically, and through investment in certain parts of our neighborhood. If you want to see people change in their neighborhood, change the things we can around them in their neighborhood, and this tax allows us to do that. Lastly, Mayor, I'll say that people ask me all the time, why would I want to get involved in public service, knowing that it's a thankless job and that we're going to get yelled at more than we get patted on the back, knowing that we're going to get a bunch of emails saying we're doing things wrong instead of getting emails saying we're doing things right. Well, the reason why I ran, because I was tired of Little Rock being what it is. I was tired of hearing people say, Little Rock, that's just how it is. That's just how it's going to be. Well, it doesn't have to be the way it is. It can be better. Little Rock can be better. And I believe in better. I believe in a better Little Rock. I think this tax helps make Little Rock better. And for that, I want my colleagues to know, I want the citizens of Little Rock to know that I'm supportive of this framework because it improves our city, and we're not going to be stuck on it being what it is. Let's focus on what it can be. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Director Phillips. I believe we've shared enough for the evening. I want to make sure that thank the members of our department directors who have worked extensively to help pull together this program as well, and being here available to share feedback. We'll now transition. We do recognize we'll have executive boards and appointments. We'll now transition to Director Cox, who will give our legislative update, and then following her, Director Linehan.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. There continues to be lots of activity under the dome. So just a quick update on some things that are still in play. In terms of the bills that are part of our package that we would like to see enacted, Senate Bill 528 by Senator Sample requires DFA to provide us with electronic monthly reports of awarded credits or rebates, so that will provide us with more information. And that bill has passed the Senate and is on the House committee meeting for this afternoon, and I had not seen an update before I got up here. House Bill 1626 that streamlines the process for responding to FOIA requests for salaries is now Act 658. And then in regards to bills of concerns, I've mentioned before that there are several gun bills that have come before the legislature. And House Bill 1598 is a gun bill that does have the effect of allowing guns in our parks. And that is on its way to the governor's office. It has passed both chambers. And Chief Humphrey did do a nice job speaking about the issues with that bill before the committee. And Senate Bill 573 has passed the Senate, and this bill authorizes licensed concealed carry in public buildings, and that bill is on the House Judiciary Committee agenda. Additionally, House Bill 1704 by Representative Ray prohibits local governments from restricting the use of auxiliary containers, which is broadly defined. It includes things like straws and cups. And that bill came before committee on multiple occasions and was amended several times. And it has passed the House now, and it will be before the Senate soon. House Bill 1808 amends the law concerning municipal regulation of unsanitary conditions, and it's one that the city attorney has shared with you as well. And this bill is still in the House committee, so it has not moved. So I wanted to share that. Senate Bill 496 by Senator Rapert is a special elections bill. That's the most favorable one that we have seen this session, and it is now an act, and it allows for 4 dates in a year. And then Senator Hester has recently filed Senate Bill 635, which allows for 2 special election dates only. So that bill is still out there, although the 4 dates is an act currently. And then Senate Bill 634, also by Senator Hester, prohibits local governments from restricting a landowner from performing tree maintenance, including tree removal. And that bill is on a Senate committee for this week, and it was just filed last week, I believe. And the legislature should be wrapping up in the next couple of weeks. And that is the conclusion of my report.
Thank you so much, Director Cox. We know how much time you've been spending at the Dome, whether in person or virtually, and really do appreciate you and your leadership. Director Peck, then Director Phillips.
Well, very quick. I have to always bring up something good. So I'm asking you all to, if you haven't signed up, Impact the Rock is on Saturday. I know where you're going to be, I think. It's a day of, aren't you going back where you were last year on Roosevelt? Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got the wrong intel.
I'm pretty sure, whatever you tell me to be.
It is a day of service and unity. We're working in 9 different parks or areas, including Heinemann and the zoo, Animal Village, Reservoir, Roosevelt, all over the place. At 9 to 12, you can go with littlerock.gov website and sign up and come improve our city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Phillips. And then just everyone aware, we still have Director Linehan. Just want to know.
And I just want to say, since Director Peckton said she also made a commercial for Impact the Rock that you can check out on YouTube.
Oh, don't tell them about that.
Director Cox, I think you mentioned Bill 1598, is the gun bill in the parks. Would that allow us, like previous bills, to opt out where we say in Little Rock parks you can't bring a gun, or no?
I do not think we would have that option.
Okay. I just wanted that for clarity. Thank you.
But you do own the park, and the ability to exclude is one of the arrows in the quiver of property rights, which in Arkansas are higher than other rights.
So you're saying that the city could enforce a no guns in our parks despite the likely signing of this bill?
I'm simply giving you the language about an unconstitutional, uncompensated taking of property rights.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Director Linehan?
So Antoine, so we could, right.
Turn this on. Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the board, those of you that are left.
I've eaten.
I'm going to go through a preliminary year-end report. As you know, well, you may not know, our auditors are on site. We are beginning the process of conducting our annual audit now. Our final financial report will be at the end of June. We still have some actuary reports, some other things that come in a little bit later, so there will be some additional adjustments here. But this is our fourth quarter as of March 31st. So on our first slide, you'll see that this is all in comparison to the final amended budget that we adopted. We exceeded our revenue forecast by 0.26%, our final amended budget. This compares to 102.13% of our 2019 budget. On the next slide, you'll see that our revenues were $200,825,054. This is in the general fund, which is about $522,000 above the amended budget, and it's about $8.8 million less than the same period a year ago, and that's primarily due to the impact of COVID. So on this slide, you'll see the various revenues and how they performed in accordance with the amended budget. I want to explain what happened with our general property taxes. So on the financial reports that I send out each month, there's a page in the very back that provides definitions, and one of those is on the modified accrual basis of accounting, which is how governmental accounting standards require that we recognize revenues for our governmental funds. In order to recognize revenue in a governmental fund, it has to be both reasonably measurable and available. So what happened with our property taxes, we receive an excess commission payment from the county annually. We normally receive that by February of the following year. It's for the previous year. So we expected in February to receive our 2020 excess commissions. This year, due to the ice and the snow and everything else that happened, they were late in providing that payment to us. We did not receive it until mid-March. And so because of that, we could not recognize that 2020 commission in our February revenues for our governmental funds. So that total was about $1.1 million. It will be reflected in our 2021 revenue. Now, of that amount, about $325,000 of that goes directly to our closed police and fire pension plans. But that is the reason that our property taxes fell short of budget. I'm going to go into great detail on our sales tax in a moment, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it right here. And I'm also going to talk about our utility franchise fees when we get to another slide. You'll see our other revenues were very, very close to the budgeted forecast. And I'm going to go in more detail compared to our original budget and to the previous year in just a moment. So this next slide is one that Director Campuras requested a few years ago, and it shows the budget in comparison to or the results in comparison to our original adopted budget. So our pre-COVID forecast for 2020 was $207,889,419 for our revenues excluding transfers in. You'll see our final amended numbers were $200,825,054. which was about 7 million shy of that original budget. And as you look down at the categories, we already talked about sales tax, or I mean the property tax. So that one should not be considered with the others. But you'll notice licenses and permits, charges for services, fines and fees, utility franchise. Those are all areas that were hardest hit by COVID. And that'll be really easy to see when we compare to the same period a year ago on the next slide. So when we look at the same period a year ago, the first line that stands out is our licenses and permits. So that category not only includes annual business licenses, which are very stable, but it also includes the fees associated with mixed drink sales at restaurants and bars and that kind of thing. So we have a mixed drink supplemental revenue. And that revenue declined 1.1 million from 2019. And that was due directly to the impact of COVID and the closures that were associated with the restaurants and the bars during that period of time. Charges for services, you'll see that was down almost 3.5 million from the same period a year ago. 2.1 million of that revenue was a decline in our zoo revenues. Our fitness center declined 426,000. River market revenues declined 358,000. And our parks by a like amount. Golf was much less impacted with only a negative 59,000. And that's because as things began to gradually open up, that was an activity that could be done safely outside. And so the loss of revenue was not as substantial there. The fines and fees decreased 747,000 from the same period a year ago. Court activities were suspended in mid-March due to the coronavirus. A virtual circuit or court cyber docket took its place, but revenues declined in all sorts of areas, and there was a reduction in the number of tickets and things like that issued as well. The franchise fees, I saw a very significant decline of almost $1.5 million. 900,000 of that was associated with energy, and another 274,000 was associated with our gas revenues, and I'll be talking about those more in just a moment. Then the other line that had a fairly significant decrease was the miscellaneous revenue, the 2.5 million. And that's primarily due to, in 2019, you'll recall LRCBB made a contribution in order to retire a short-term note that was taken out for the Cromwell building early. And so there was no prepayment penalty for reducing or for paying off that note. We had a like reduction in the debt service and all, but that was a one-time thing that happened in 2019. So again, in total, our revenues were just over 8.8 million less than the same period a year ago, and primarily due to the impact of COVID. So on this next slide, oops, I went too far. Hold on. Way too far. Okay, so this next slide is the sales tax information that shows our sales tax revenues by, well, hold on just a second. Yeah, by the piece, the green bar is the city's share of the county 1% tax. The blue bars are the city's local tax, and or actually the blue bars are the state turnback fund, and the city tax is the red bar. So you'll see that these are indicated based on when they're collected. So when you see, this is for the year ended in December is the very last, but you see December 20, 2 months ahead of that, because that's actually the October revenue that we received in December. So after the impact of COVID, we started seeing the declines where it says January, that's the receipts where we started seeing the big declines in the local sales tax. And I'm going to show you some of the detail on why the county fared better than the city as we move forward in some of the next slides. But for the fourth quarter, the city sales tax, or the combined sales tax, decreased, or it increased 0.93% combined in October. December decreased 1.06%, and the November decreased 1.3% respectively, and that was in combination. But you can see by the different components, the city tax dropped by more than that, but it was partially offset by the increase in the county tax. So on the next slide, we see the combined effect. So that's where you can see that overall, the sales tax decreased. It increased 0.93% in October. It decreased 1.06% in November, which was received in January, and then it decreased 1.3% in December, received in February. So for the year, the results were 0.41% above the same, above 2019. We had a very strong first quarter. And before the impact of COVID, our sales tax was actually up almost 5.3%. And then after the impact of COVID, we had an average decline of 2.12%. So now this shows by month. When we adopted our amended budget in November, we had the results in through September, and we adjusted, we trued those up, and then we forecast, because we were compared to the period where we had already had the benefit of internet sales in the previous year. We assumed that the county tax would decrease 1% in comparison to the previous year over the remainder of the year, and we anticipated the city tax would decrease 3.5% based on what we were seeing. But actually, our results ended up stronger than that. The big decline that you see in February in the budget of 7.66% on line 12, that's because we had a large audit recovery in December of 2019. We did not build that into our forecast for 2020, knowing that we would not have that audit recovery again. So we actually decreased the forecast, but our revenues exceeded what we anticipated in that fourth quarter. So I thought it would be interesting to share with you by the NAICS category, which is the only way we receive information from the state, who our top 10 losing categories were and what our top 10 gaining categories were. So you can see right up there at number 1, the traveler accommodation decreased $1.2 million from the same period a year ago. And these are in actual dollars for the city's full 1.5% sales tax. So of course, 3/8 of this goes to the capital improvement fund and the rest goes to general fund operations, but this is the way we receive it from the state. Full service restaurants was second, declining over $1 million. Electric power generation, transmission, and distribution was down $947,000. That reflected the decrease we saw in our energy revenues. The automotive equipment rental and leasing declined. Electric goods wholesalers is the category where we saw the one large increase last year in April. We did not forecast that to continue, and wisely so. But then you'll see most of these categories: traveler accommodation, full service restaurants, automotive equipment leasing, clothing stores, department stores, consumer goods rental, motion picture video industry. All of those are declines that were hard hit by COVID. And in total, just those top 10 categories decreased almost $6 million, or 30% from the same period a year ago. So how did we end up with a decline of only 1.10%? Okay, here we see our top gainers. So because of the act at the previous legislative session, we finally could collect the sales tax on internet sales. Now, that internet sales appears in more than one category, but this is one category where it does show up, especially if the business is not one that's located anywhere in the state. If you buy online at Walmart, it's going to show up in the category of where the Walmart store is. But in some of the other categories, if it's a business that's not already in one of our sales tax groupings, it shows up in this electronic shopping and mail order houses. So you can see that that increased 87% from a year ago. It was a $1.8 million increase. So we made up quite a bit of our losses in this area. Now, this next one is a mystery category. The state keeps taxpayer information confidential, as I've said. They keep it so confidential that if there's not at least three major businesses, if there's any way for you to figure out who it is, they lump it in this all other category, a category that has less than three businesses, or where less than three businesses exist in any other category. That one increased 985,000. We don't really know what it is, but I suspect it had to do, in looking at the comparative county information, I suspect it had to do with some of the construction projects going on at the port in some of the metals and different things that show up on the county side. Other areas that saw big increases are grocery stores, machinery and equipment and supply wholesalers. No one could buy liquor at a restaurant or a bar, so the liquor stores fared very well, and we see a big increase there. Electronics and appliances, people
Director,
fixed up their homes.
Linehan, can I interrupt just for a second and ask a
Sure.
question? As it relates to the beer and wine on 4453,
Mhm.
is that just from liquor stores, or would that be, because you can buy beer and wine at a grocery store? So
And
where,
it does include the grocery store beer and wine, I believe. Now, it's possible that that's also reflected in the grocery line.
okay, so we're not sure which one.
We're not 100% sure.
Okay.
We don't get a whole lot of information, but this is an area that did increase quite a bit. So the interesting part of this is the total in these areas came to $5.6 million in increase for our top 10 that increased. And when you compare that to our top 10 losers of 5.9 million, or almost 6 million, the net decrease just in these top 10 groups was about $300,000. Overall, our sales tax declined 1.1%. So why did the county do better than we did? So on the next slide, you'll see that the county, their losses were in a lot of the same categories: full service restaurants, traveler accommodations, electric power. They had a bigger impact with automotive dealers, but for the most part, their categories that declined were very similar to the cities. But the overall decline in the top 10 was only 4.1 million and 21% instead of almost 6 million and 30%. On the areas that saw gains, though, electronic shopping and mail order houses, they had a bigger increase in this category, both from a percentage perspective and a dollar perspective. And a lot of people that were buying remotely at outside of the city, stayed closer to home within the county. And so that area was a big gainer for them. Building material and supplies was the second largest. And then iron and steel mills and ferroalloy manufacturing. And so I think those two categories probably lend themselves to a lot of the construction activity with the major economic development going on at the port and throughout the city. But the interesting thing here is the gains, their gain categories: beer, wine, liquor stores, a lot of the same ones we have, with the exception of the iron and steel, ferroalloy manufacturing, and the building materials. But the increases brought in $7 million, or 24% gain, compared to the top 10 losers of only $4.1 million. So there was an addition, actually, of $2.9 million in between the two. The county sales tax grew 3% compared to the city's loss of 1.10%. So the next slide shows our 2012 3/8 sales tax and the history of it over the last 10 years. And so you can see each year we've got a comparison to the previous year. When you get down to the second half, the top half of the slide is the months. So again, the local tax declined 1.1%. It brought in 53.7 million. The average of the last 3 years was that 53 million that we are basing the new tax budget on. But you can see that we had, in 2019, we had growth of 7.2%. But in most of the years besides that, we had 0.76% from 2012 to 2013, 1.4% the next year. We had a good year of 3.6% growth and then a flat year of 0.12. So with the tax collections that have been brought in, as I mentioned earlier, we did not achieve the growth that we anticipated. As of 12/31/2020, from the original forecast that we estimated, we are $6.3 million behind the original forecast through the end of 2020. But as the city manager said, and part of it is because with a lot of the projects, there was a contingency considered. Most of the projects will be completed. The only one that won't be would be that court building. On the next slide, we have our electric franchise fees. So the amended budget was $13,272,000, which was a decrease from the original forecast that we received from Energy of $1,227,000. They had given us a budget of $14.5 million, and then revenues decreased. There was a part of that probably had a little bit to do with collection associated with COVID, but the biggest thing was the ECR adjustment. They had a rate adjustment that took effect in April of 2020, and it reduced their forecast by between 3% and 7%. The next slide, our gas franchise fees declined 7%, and they actually fell short of the amended budget by 169, or by almost 220,000 at year end. So now we'll move on to our expenditures. So our revenues came in, as I mentioned, about $500,000 above the final amended budget, but $8.8 million below the same period a year ago. On the expenditure side, we made several reductions during the year as we were facing COVID, and we were able to finish the year at 98.64% of our amended budget compared to 99.67% the same period a year ago. So, and this excludes transfers out and debt service, but we expended $188.7 million in 2020 compared to $201.6 million in 2019. So on the next slide, you see by category, and again, this is preliminary. There could be some additional expenditure adjustments as we finish up the audit. But you'll see that on the first page with our total general government, all of the departments came in slightly below budget. The only one that had more than a 5% variance was the criminal court. And there again, most of the savings were in personnel cost due to the reduced utilization of part-time staff and labor because of the closure of the court facility. The next slide is the remainder of the departments. You'll see Parks and Recreation, and of course they were not 5% below budget. None of the other categories, other than River Market, Gym Daily Fitness, and Zoo, I think, came in at more than 5% or 50,000 below budget. And again, that's due to primarily to reduced utilization of part-time staff, reduced customer service expenses at the zoo, the closure in supplies and materials, primarily at the zoo. It was because the Cafe Africa was closed for the year. And then fire and police came in within less than a 1% variance of their budget, but all favorable variances. And again, just due to reduced activity. So during the year, we adjusted our forecast for vacancy savings to $6 million. We actually achieved that by the end of the third quarter. So that additional vacancy savings is why we had favorable variances, I think, in those departments. And it helped to offset some of the additional vacation sick payouts where people decided to retire or go ahead and leave the city. On the next slide, you see that at the end of the year, we had 156 vacant positions in the general fund, which at that time included 26 police officers and 8 sergeants. So in summary for the general fund, we went through the variances in the revenues, and we had a favorable 521,000. We had a favorable total of variances in the departments of $2.6 million. So the net favorable variance was $3.1 million. Our transfers in was right on target. Our transfers out was right on target. So our preliminary results have net income of about $3.1 million, primarily due to reduced expenditures. And so if you'll recall, during our budget discussions for 2021, there was a strong desire to move to a self-funded insurance plan. And as the audit moves forward, first of all, we are still trying to get our fund balance up to that threshold and our restricted reserve of where we're closer to the target that we needed to reach. And the city attorney is still working on the financial ordinances that we want to bring to you, but we're going to recommend having an overall target of about 17% for fund balance, which is 2 months of operating expenses. It's just 2 months. And as we can see by what we've been through in the last couple of years with some of the changes, the impact of COVID and all, it's important to have that. But this $3 million may give us some of the seed money that we need in order to move to self-funded and have that reserve that we would need to have if we were to make that decision. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the street fund just at a high level. So street fund revenues, much like general fund revenues, very close to target. The expenditures were favorable of $2.1 million and almost exactly the same as last year, same period a year ago. And so they were 1.14%. The revenues were 1.14% above budget. The expenditures were actually 11% below budget. When you look at the transfers in and out, those were right on budget. The street fund ended with a deficit of $2.1 million, but that was because of the planned use of the $4.6 million for the UAMS Pine Cedar project, where we had been accumulating earnings for that process. So we actually ended up favorable to what we had anticipated by $2.4 million in the street fund. In the waste disposal fund, our operating expenses are over budget by $600,000, and that's because of the landfill closure and post-closure costs. Annually, we're required by ADEQ to have a study of our landfill closure and post-closure costs. Well, that study that it's done, conducted annually, we receive it in March for the previous year. And we estimate costs throughout the year based on the tonnage that's deposited to the landfill. Well, that study had been using the last time a cell was closed, and it was applying a 1 to 2% cost adjustment each year to the cost, increasing it, anticipating that would be adequate for closure and post-closure. But when the city took bids last year to close a portion of cell 4, the costs were much higher than what they had anticipated. So when they did the study this last year, they adjusted to the actual rates for closure of cell 4, and that increased the required amount we had to set aside for closure and post-closure by $1.3 million. So that was kind of a one-time catch-up. It had to be reflected in the 2020 revenues, or 2020 expenses. We should not see that kind of an adjustment moving forward, but that's the reason that we had the expenditures over budget in the waste disposal fund. In our fleet fund, you'll see the operating revenues were below budget, almost $2 million, and the expenditures were had a favorable variance of $2.6 million. Well, the fleet fund is an internal service fund. So when the revenues are down, it means it did not bill as much to the other departments for services. And that was because of the lower fuel cost. We made some adjustments for fuel costs, but it was significantly lower than anticipated last year. And then we also had very favorable variances in our parts and contracted services. And that's due to the fleet replacement program and the leasing of vehicles. And that's one of the things that will go away with the 3/8 tax. That's where our fleet replenishment budget is. So it's important to maintain the fleet. That's one of the important things in our new proposal that would be lost with the loss of the 3/8. But the fleet fund did transfer $682,000, and that was primarily for upfit for public safety vehicles. So they used some of the excess that they had generated and ended up just basically even for the year. Our vehicle storage fund, we had forecast a decrease in the revenues associated with COVID, and then there was an auction, a large auction in the fourth quarter that helped increase revenues by $107,000. So we beat the revenue target by $141,000 and had a favorable variance in expenses as well. So the vehicle storage fund ended with net income of $402,000, which was $251,000 better than what we had anticipated. And again, I just want to remind you, these are preliminary numbers. We know with some of the actuarial reports that we get in for our pensions, especially for our enterprise funds, there will be an adjustment to the pension cost based on that actuarial study that will change these numbers just a bit. And then finally, for our parking garages. So we're very fortunate that in our parking garage fund, we also include our street cut revenue for street repairs when utility companies cut into our streets. That's one of the pledged revenues towards our bonds, as is the taxi and rental car business licenses. And so while the parking revenues themselves declined significantly, especially the daily parking, the monthly parking stayed at about 85 to 90% of what it had been, but the daily parking was practically non-existent with COVID. But it was the street cut revenue that helped us to maintain our amended forecast. Now, we did revise our forecast down. You can see compared to the same period a year ago, we dropped it by over $700,000, but the expenses were also reduced significantly. The staff that normally mans the parking garages, they were no longer working, and just those monthly parkers were using their card keys to get in and park monthly. The expenses for like security and for part-time staff, all of those things were cut significantly to offset the lost revenue. So the good news here is while our parking revenues were put on negative outlook, we did maintain sufficient revenue that we did not lose anything in our bond rating for our parking garage. And that covers all of our budgeted funds. This is just a preliminary year-end report, but this we also publish a report in the paper annually before April 1st per state statute. It's a different layout. It looks at instead of looking at it by department, it looks at it by expenditure categories, salaries, and that kind of thing. But this report that was presented here and the monthly financial report that was distributed to you on March 31st, all of those are as of that point in time. And then we'll issue a final report when the audit is complete in June. Are there any questions?
First, before we go, I believe we have a question from Director Adcock. Sarah, just want to take time to share our appreciation to you and your team. We know you guys have a lot on your plate and to still churn this out. Congratulations as well on another year receiving the GFOA award for our budget and financing expertise that's been led by you, and you get the credit with your entire team, and we appreciate your entire team. I know you guys spent a lot of hours working to stay on top of the numerous amount of deadlines and compliances that you have. And so I want you to know how much we appreciate you, and hope and ask all the board, I know this is a lot to digest. Please take time to read through it all. If you have any questions, to please, if you don't, in addition to questions you may have tonight, but this is phenomenal to see what we've been able to navigate through in the midst of unexpectation. But through your stewardship and fiscal leadership, we've been able to make it through. And that's because of you and your team. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. And I do want to let everyone know too, our 2021 budget document has been submitted to the government finance officers. But it is posted online now on the city's website, and it has great detail about every department. It's a, probably close to 300-page document about our budget. And when we were talking about things at the last board meeting and y'all were asking questions, I was looking at some of those budget documents to compare staffing levels from 2012 to 2021, and all of that information is available online to the public. And so I really do recommend that you take advantage of the information that's provided out there. And I want to recognize in particular Anita Worley, our Deputy Director of Finance, and then Debbie Carrero for their work in particularly the financial reports. And then we've got a new budget manager. She's actually special operations manager handling both budget and internal audit. And that's Keisha Gansky. And she had a lot to do with the production of the 2021 budget document. And you'll get an opportunity to meet her soon, but I wanted you to know, at least to name those folks who are very integral to the financial reporting.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Director Adcock?
Yes, Sarah, our city is dirtier now than I've ever seen it, with piles all over the streets and everything. I would like for you to look at this and tell us how much money the city has made off of the charges of the second, charging people for the second bulk pickup a year. Because I think this board might want to revisit that, because we need to do something to get this trash off of our streets.
Okay. So that would be in our waste disposal fund, but I'll take a look at that.
Page 25.
Yes.
I would like to know how much we have made off of over first pickups. Thank you.
Director Wright.
And Sarah, we still do not have a way to determine well, we might not even be getting any, but don't we get something off of this marijuana tax?
We do not.
People keep saying, well, they pay tax on it. Yeah, but it don't come to us.
Right. It's not. And I think Mr. Carpenter knows exactly where it goes, but I believe it's the state is.
I believe it's public health in Department of Health or something.
The state has to go to a special commission that deals with marijuana funds. The legislature controls who they are.
Can we not request an allocation from them?
No, I mean, the commission sets out who gets it and what it's for, and it's basically all for the state.
To me, that hardly seems fair, that we can't get in. These things are in our neighborhoods. We're dealing with the fallout of whatever you want to call it, because I promise you, I'd never believed that it was this many people that needed marijuana medically. It's just amazing to me, the level of sales, and we can't get anything. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other question from members of the board. Oh, Director Phillips.
Not for Director Linehan. I was gonna.
Director Phillips.
Want to direct this to City Manager, Ms. Moore. I would like for the board, I heard Director Wire talk about this a little bit earlier as it relates to planning commission things about civic engagement and being involved in the process. I would like the board to move our meetings. I would like quarterly that we have an agenda meeting or some sort at one of our community centers around town, whether it's us sitting in the gym. But obviously we have the technology and the capability where we don't have to be in one place. But I want us to go where the people are and make them more a part of this process of us operating this city on their behalf. So I would like for you to look at maybe giving us something where here's the 4 places that make the most sense, capacity-wise, logistic-wise. Obviously, that's going to take some work from our IT department, and I know it's an undertaking, so I'm not asking for it to be done next week. But I would like us to consider taking our meetings to the people where they don't have to come downtown, whether it's maybe West Central, whether it's Southwest Community Center. I mean, I think there's a number of places where we can go and be where the people are. So if you can look at that for me, Mr. Moore, and let me know what you find. Thank you.
Director Wyrick?
I was just gonna tell Director Phillips that we used to do that.
Oh, really?
We used to take our meeting to the community, and the community loved it. So it was a great thing. I'm glad we enjoyed doing that. So I'm glad you brought it up. Maybe we can revisit it. Some of our mayors were for it, and some of them weren't for it. So, but
I'm always for being near the people, so we can do it.
okay, okay. It was a great deal. We all enjoyed it.
Well, good to know
Good
that.
thought.
I did not know that. So
Yeah,
thank
we
you for
did.
sharing that.
But Director Phillips, as mayor, I definitely support that, being chair of the board, moving that. And definitely, we entertain Mr. Moore coming up with a plan on how we can do it as efficient and effective as possible. Director, is your hand still up, Director Wyrick? Is your hand still up? Oh, so I didn't know if you had another comment.
Down.
Oh. All right,
Waiting.
seeing no other questions. But just before we get back, going back over the agenda, we'll, just for the record, we will transition the targeted community development policy discussion for the next agenda meeting. We'll be visiting with wards 1, 2, 6, and 7 on as I consult with you on those working group members. We do have at least one of those members. I'll get with you individually on wards 1, 2, 6, and 7. From that standpoint, logistically, it looks like Director Hines asked to request resolution number 13 to be separate. I just want to share with the members of the board that is to extend the state of emergency. As mayor, I can, when there is a state of emergency, I can create it, but it can only go into in effect for 120 days. At the point that it goes over to 121, the board has to give that extension of that authorization. So that's why it's come before the board to get that permission to go to 121 and beyond. Is that correct way of explaining it, Mr. Attorney?
Mm-hmm.
That's item number 13. And that allows for us to continue, as we shared, that when we were able to amend the existing executive order to include the extension of the mask mandate, and that we would look at it every 30 days. That 30th day, I believe, comes around April the 28th. But this is also to extend the state of the emergency. We do foresee, as we shared earlier, that every 30 days we will make a look at it. We're starting to see some more people taking vaccination. I definitely want to give a shout out to everyone, because I know individually everyone has been doing some various things to get more vaccination. I do know we have some vaccinations coming up here in the next couple of weeks that City Director Adcock is leading for our Latinx community in Southwest Little Rock. So want to give her kudos, but also know that City Director Wright, Webb, Peck, Phillips, and Richardson and Hendricks, and even Director Hines have all played a role in helping to encourage vaccinations, and we're grateful for all the members of the board from that standpoint. But we do have some coming up this week. So just want to give everyone from that standpoint, and I believe also item 19 is held separate, along with, and our city attorney is going to rewrite item 27, and he's going to try to have that to us here in the coming days. Is that correct, Director, City Attorney?
Yes, sir.
As well as item 25. And as I shared, we'll have on the sales tax as well. So thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned. That's what the board.